Chapter 585. Rubbing his head, Yun Nuoxing walked back to the Juyuan pavilion. He turned around and looked at the lonely figure on the star platform. He frowned slightly and kept rubbing his fingers in his sleeve. His heart was in a mess. Leave the blood crystal and take the rest. Go and deal with your matters. I'll wait for you here. Come back soon. Touching the black pearl in front of his forehead, Yun Nuoxing's strange expression became more and more profound. In between his eyebrows, besides the imprint of the deity left by Xian Yin, there was another imprint. It was a seed imprint that coexisted with the deity imprint. The two of them seemed to be equally matched. In other words, that girl was probably at the same level as the deity imprint. Behind these two imprints, there was a scarlet ball of light and a colorful ball of light. Yun Nuoxing had discovered them a long time ago. However, no matter how he touched them, there was no reaction, so he simply ignored them. Even now, they were still glowing. Until now, he did not know what use they had. Suddenly raising his head, Yun Nuoxing seemed to have thought of something. At that time, he had obtained a scroll of the celestial glaze god in Yuyan City. However, he had not been able to open it. Now that he had encountered a deity, perhaps he could ask her for help, but to his disappointment, the space in front of him was filled with mist, and the slender, white figure gradually disappeared in the mist. He couldn't help but let out a sigh. Next time, I'll definitely remember it. The fog seemed to appear from the void and completely covered the space outside the pavilion. Standing in the Juyuan pavilion, Yun Nuoxing could only see a vast expanse of whiteness. The fog could not touch the pavilion. It seemed to be isolated by something. However, this scene did not last long. The thick fog slowly dissipated. What appeared in front of Yun Nuoxing again was not a beautiful and magnificent mountain. Instead, it was a small lake and a small mountain. Beside the lake, there was a group of people looking at the pavilion on the mountain. They were looking forward to it. I'm back. Yun Nuoxing was stunned. Then, he smiled bitterly. He did not feel the activation of the array, nor did he feel the change in energy. He just went from one place to another. It's out, it's out. Seeing that the mist around the gazebo had dissipated and Yun Nuoxing's figure appeared in their sight, the Golden Empress and the others were also slightly delighted. Xian and the others hurriedly stretched out their hands and waved, their beautiful faces brimming with joy. Seeing everyone like that, Yun Nuoxing couldn't help but laugh. She missed them a little after not seeing them for a day. When he thought of this, he quickly walked down the mountain and crossed the wooden bridge. However, before he reached the group, he saw that everyone was looking at him with a strange expression. That strange expression seemed to contain a few strange emotions, causing him to be stunned. He muttered to himself, "Why do I have an ominous feeling? Little Xingxing, you've finally come out. It's already been 3 days." Seeing him walk over, Ziyan went up to him with a smile. 3 days? But it's only been a day. Yun Nuoxing was stunned. She couldn't help but feel speechless. This time difference was probably that girl's masterpiece. Are you worried? Yun Nuoxing smiled and rubbed her head. Xian pursed her lips and pulled him back. When they reached the group, she let him go. Then, Mei Mao looked at him with a smile and retreated to the side. He was stunned. Was she going to sentence him? What was going on? The Golden Empress rubbed her forehead. Mei Mao glanced at him, then looked at Qin Yan, who was beside her with a calm expression. She sighed, then took out a red wedding invitation from her earring and handed it to Yun Nuoxing. She smiled bitterly and said, "See for yourself." Yun Nuoxing was stunned when he received the wedding invitation. The ominous premonition in his heart was completely confirmed. He suddenly raised his head and looked at Qin Yan. The latter felt uncomfortable under his gaze. She quietly turned around and walked to the side. Everyone smiled bitterly when they saw this. Seeing Qin Yan's reaction, Yun Nuoxing laughed dryly. He swallowed his saliva and opened the wedding invitation with trembling hands. When he saw the names, Yun Nuoxing and Qin Yan, he almost vomited blood. However, when he saw clearly that it was only an engagement invitation, he heaved a sigh of relief. "What's going on?" Yun Nuoshing's forehead was dripping with sweat. He turned his head stiffly and looked at the Golden Empress and the others with wide, colorful eyes. "We want to ask what's going on." Seeing his strange expression, everyone widened their eyes in shock. They were the ones who didn't understand the situation. "We thought that little star and Sister Yen were in love with each other." Xian blinked at Mei Mao in shock and said strangely, "We were waiting for you to come out and congratulate her." "You? Girl, are you trying to make me angry?" Yun Nuoshing felt like he was going crazy when he heard her say this. "No, I'm just thinking that if you and Big Sister Yen become friends, then I have to build a good relationship with Big Sister Yen and pay respects to her." Ziyen blinked her beautiful eyes and smiled like a brilliant rose blooming, causing everyone to be absent-minded. Seeing that she really didn't seem to care, Yun Nuoshing was at a loss for words. He opened his mouth wide and didn't know what to say. "Little star, go and see her. You two can chat for a while." She patted him on the shoulder and said softly. Yun Nuoshing smiled bitterly when he heard this. He turned his gaze and looked at Qin Yen, who was standing alone by the lake not far away. Yun Nuoshing coughed dryly and chuckled. Qin Yen turned around. Mei Mao stared straight at him. Her red lips parted slightly, but she suddenly closed them again and pressed them tightly together. Mei Mao hesitated. "Speak frankly. There's nothing to be afraid of. No one will force you to do anything. Neither will I." Yun Nuoshing chuckled and waved his hand when he saw that she seemed to have something to say. Qin Yen nodded when she heard that. She clenched her jade-like hands tightly together and took a deep breath. She said hesitantly, "I told father and mother. I don't want to get married so early. I thought that nothing would happen, but in the end she couldn't help but laugh bitterly. In the end she got engaged." Yun Nuoshing felt a little strange, especially since he was the one who caused this situation. It made him feel even weirder. It felt like he had shot himself in the foot. "However, we didn't say when we had to get married, so?" Qin Yen smiled awkwardly. Her jade-like hands fidgeted uneasily. "Drag it out as long as you can, but dragging it out like this isn't a solution. The main point is, what do you think? You know, or rather, all of you know, what's wrong with me. So, the most important thing is, what do you think?" Yun Nuoshing crossed his arms in his sleeves and sighed softly. Qin Yen panicked when she heard that. Mei Mao's eyes kept flickering, but she couldn't find the focal point. "I don't know either. I don't even know what I'm thinking." After a while, Qin Yen shook her head in distress. Her eyebrows were intertwined with complicated thoughts. "Then I'll ask you directly. If someone else got engaged to you, how would you feel?" Yun Nuoshing put her hands on her hips and asked in a bad mood. How could this girl not even know what she was thinking? "I would probably hate it." Qin Yen panicked. Her heart was beating wildly like a little deer. "Now that I'm engaged to you, how do you feel?" Yun Nuoshing took a deep breath and asked again. I don't hate it," Qin Yen blurted out. After she finished speaking, her delicate body trembled. She lowered her head even more, and her pretty face was so red that it was almost burning. "Huh!" Yun Nuoshing was shocked by this answer. This answer seemed to be somewhat out of his expectations. "Little star, oh little star, who told you to flirt around everywhere?" This time, something really happened. "Who told you to flirt around everywhere? Let's see how you're going to clean up this mess." In the spiritual world, Ziyi, who was reading a book, slammed his head on the table when he heard this. Lan Xian'er, who was sitting opposite him, was shocked. She looked at him with a cup of tea in her hand. Then, she smiled and said, "Brother Nuoshing is so outstanding. Many people will like him, especially those who have interacted with him before." When Yun Nuoshing heard these words in his mind, he couldn't help but roll his eyes. Then, he let out a long sigh and replied fiercely in his heart, "I don't think anyone will like me." There must be something wrong with this world. Looking at Qin Yan, whose pretty face was still flickering with a conflicted expression, Yun Nuoxing shook his head, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. He reached out and patted her shoulder. She was so frightened that her delicate body trembled. After a while, she calmed down. Mei Mao looked at him with some panic. He then said helplessly, "Live your life however you want. No one can force you to make a choice. You are the main character in your world." Chapter 586. Everyone in the distance craned their necks to look at the two people strolling on the shore. They were gossipy and wanted to eavesdrop, but Yun Nuoxing blocked their words, making everyone's hearts itch. Only Xian didn't care. She sat by the lake with her legs bent, humming a song, as if everything had nothing to do with her. "Xian, do you really not care?" Feng asked softly as she leaned against her and sat down gently. Xian smiled and shook her head. She turned to look at her and said with a smile, "Feng I'm really not worried about anything. Little Star's decision is up to him." Xian and Mei Mao glanced at the two people. A touch of tenderness flashed in Mei Mao's eyes. As long as Yun Nuoxing was fine, it was fine. She wouldn't think too much about anything else. She loved him and tolerated everything about him, so she wouldn't resist his choice. After a long while, the two people walked around the lake. When they came back, their faces were very calm. There was no trace of emotion, which confused everyone. However, the two didn't say anything. Qin Yan was still so quiet, and Yun Nuoxing just smiled mysteriously. Neither of them said anything. Let nature take its course. Everyone looked at each other and looked at the two with strange eyes. They sighed inexplicably. They didn't know what the two little guys were doing. If they said it was harmonious, there seemed to be a strange atmosphere. If they said it was happy, there was no intimacy between the two of them. It could only be said that it was a little ambiguous. While everyone was thinking, Xian saw that Yun Nuoxing and Feng had walked far away. She smiled, took Feng hand, stood up, and trotted after them. When everyone saw this, they sighed and followed unhurriedly. "Now? Of course, I'm going to take a look at the void fire that I yearn for day and night. I'm going to take a look at it." As they walked, Xian casually asked where they were going. Yun Nuoxing answered without thinking. But after she finished speaking, she turned around and looked at the large group of people. There seemed to be too many people. The Mei Mao caught a glimpse of Jin Jinwang's helpless gaze and turned back to look at him. She seemed to have understood something. Mei Mao turned around and looked at Jin Jinwang. She smiled and said, "Little Stone, send the children back first. They have all broken through to the demon rank. It's time to accept the inheritance of the temple. F***ck. Can you not go back? Let's play for a little longer. No, let's train with Little Star for a little longer. We're willing to go on our way now." That's right. It won't be too late to accept the inheritance after becoming a demigod. Before Jin Jinwang and the others could say anything, Jin Ying and the others exploded. It was as if the 9 temples were hell. Everyone's faces turned pale at the mention of going back. Jin Jinwang saw their resistance and smiled bitterly. He carefully glanced at the Jin Queen, only to see her smiling at the 9 people. Her bright forehead darkened. Mei Mao's eyes contained a very intimidating light. Even Yun Nuoxing was frightened. Yao Hua and the others were so frightened that they instantly shut their mouths. They hurriedly looked at Yun Nuoxing. There was a hint of pleading in their eyes. Well, actually, you see, the place we're going to this time is very far away. It's inconvenient to have so many people. You should listen to Sister Jean and go back to cultivate first. Besides, you've been surpassed by me again. You still need to work hard." Yun Nuoxing looked at Yao Hua and the others with pity. She raised her head and patted Yao Hua's shoulder with a fake smile. F***ck. Little Star, you're so mean. Yao Hua widened his eyes and looked at him with gritted teeth. He was very unhappy that he had abandoned them at this time. "Be good, go back first." Yun Nuoxing laughed carelessly. She looked at Jining and habitually reached out to pat her head. Jining rolled her eyes at her, but did not argue about not going back. She nodded gloomily. Seeing that she had directly surrendered, Yao Hua and the others tactfully shut up. When Empress Jean saw that her words were not as effective as Little Star's action, she speechlessly covered her face. This 9 divine shrine was really under his control. The Hall Master and the others listened to him. Even the future 9 divine kings listened to him. Even they were circling around him. Empress Jean looked around again, and said a few words to Jin Jinwang and the great elder of the Fire God Shrine. The latter and the others nodded. Jin Jinwang took out the golden bell bottle and a golden longbow and handed them to the former. Then, he retreated to the side. It seemed that the group of people from the 9 divine shrine had been pushed back by Empress Jean, leaving her alone. But she also felt a little helpless. There were really a lot of emperor gods around Yun Nuoxing. Not to mention that there were close to 30 emperor gods in the 9 divine shrine. There were 6 demon emperors who had been subdued by Feng Er. Although she did not know what the mountain emperor and the others were thinking, the empress seemed to want to follow that little guy for a while. That meant that there were at least 7 emperor gods following Yun Nuoxing and the others. This was also why she asked Jin Jinwang and the others to go back first. The 9 divine shrine was located in the northern wilderness of the divine continent, bordering the area that the demon world had asked for. They were the first line of defense, and her group was also a part of the core strength. At this time, it was better not to leave the shrine for too long. On the other side, Yun Nuoxing and the others were saying goodbye to Jining and the others one by one. He gave each of them a gentle hug. Huaji also whispered a few words to him, saying that she would wait for him to return to the divine continent. This was a promise. He also smiled and agreed. At that time, he had promised to find a divine flame for this girl. Child, be careful. The divine flame ranked 25th is not easy to deal with. Safety is the most important thing. When the young people finished saying their goodbyes, the beautiful woman walked up and rubbed Yun Nuoxing's head with a smile. He also obediently lowered his head and allowed her to rub his head gently. He nodded as he listened to the beautiful woman's advice. It felt like a mother sending off her child who had left for a foreign land. Divine King, how are Ming and the others? Yun Nuoxing couldn't help but ask. Thinking of the 2 little girls who fell into a deep sleep after going to the East Sea, Yun Nuoxing felt very distressed. Hearing him mention this, the beautiful woman couldn't help but sigh and shake her head. She said, "They are still sleeping on the star-casting platform. Several temple masters have come to see them. Temple Master Shui, who specializes in soul and spirit, also came to see the situation, but they didn't solve it. But you don't have to worry." Temple Master said that although their souls have left their bodies, they haven't really left their bodies. Now their condition is very good and their lives are not in danger. Don't worry. Also, little Ming has grown up. You will be surprised the next time you go back and see her. Yun Nuoxing was worried and happy at the same time. He was worried because they hadn't woken up yet, and happy because he heard that Ming had grown up. That's right, it wasn't until now that he realized that more than 10 years had passed. Ming had grown up. When he first saw her, she was only 4 or 5 years old. Calculating the time, it had already been 14 years since he saw her. But at that time, he heard Ming say that she was already 8 years old. Then she should be 23 or 24 years old this year. Little Yaya should also be around this age, but he didn't know which of the 2 girls was older. Let's assume that I was 14 years old when I fell. 18 years, I'm already 32 years old. Suddenly thinking of this question, Yun Nuoxing was stunned. However, the lifespan of a demon step expert was at least 100,000 years. He hadn't even reached 1,000th of that age. Although he knew, he still felt strange. Big brother! Suddenly, a soft body bumped into his arm, interrupting his thoughts. He hurriedly turned his head, only to see little Yaya hugging his arm tightly, staring at him with a pair of watery eyes. There was actually a trace of pleading in Mei Mao's eyes. "Big brother, can you take little Yaya with you? Uncle Hai and the others have all left. I don't want to go back alone. It's not easy for us to meet again. I don't want to be separated from Big Brother, okay?" "Little Yaya is very obedient," little Yaya said coquettishly as she hugged Yun Nuoxing's arm and shook it gently. All right, I'm fine with it." Yun Nuoxing blinked and suddenly felt that something was wrong. He turned his gaze slightly, only to see Qin Yen looking helplessly at little Yaya beside him. Especially when she heard him say that he was fine with it, she sighed and couldn't help but shake her head. Yun Nuoxing blinked in astonishment. "You spoil them too much." Seeing him look over, Qin Yen rolled her eyes at him in annoyance. She didn't know who he was referring to by them. "You've been living in the open all this time. The place you're going to is so dangerous. Little Yaya is only celestial level 7 now. How can she stand your torment?" Qin Yen sighed and walked over. Looking at little Yaya, who was hiding behind Yun Nuoxing and carefully looking at her, Mei Mao actually had a trace of dignity and worry in her eyes. "About that, back then, I was drifting with little Ming when I was mortal tier. The world was our home. We've endured for so many years. Little Yaya is already celestial level 7. Yun Nuoxing smiled and changed the topic. "The point is, isn't she willing? You're a pervert. Don't lump other people together." Qin Yen rolled her eyes at him. Mei Mao was still a little unwilling. Yun Nuoxing rolled his eyes and suddenly teased. "Why? Are you jealous of your sister?" Hearing that, Qin Yen rolled her eyes, but looked at him strangely for a while. After a while, she turned around and stood at the side, becoming a part of the background again. She didn't say anything else. After seeing that Qin Yen had given up struggling, little Yaya was so excited that she directly jumped up and acted coquettishly in front of Yun Nuoxing for a while. When everyone's expressions became strange, she laughed and jogged towards Xian, pulling her and Feng to chat. Brother Yun, you are also wants to go. You can't favor one and discriminate against the other. You can't even go back to the demon world." Before Yun Nuoxing could heave a sigh of relief, Yu also ran over from the side. She pulled Yun Nuoxing's hand and lightly shook it. She smiled charmingly, revealing a row of pure white teeth. She was indeed very cute, but it caused Yun Nuoxing's forehead to droop with black lines. When they parted, everyone was emotional for a while. The Empress also wanted to go with Yun Nuoxing. Previously, the latter also pestered her to guide him in his cultivation. Although she always said that she wasn't qualified to be his master, teaching him cultivation was his wish. As for Mountain, Soulblade, and the others, they followed Jin Jinwang and the others to the Nine Deities Temple. Regarding this, the Golden Empress and the others were naturally very welcoming. They were still worried about the lack of manpower. These newcomers included a blacksmith, an alchemist, a seer, and an array master. They were also very precious human resources. Seeing that the portal disappeared in space, Yun Nuoxing stopped waving his hand and looked back. He also had a headache. In addition to the original group of 7, there was now Xiao Bai, the 6 demon emperors, the Golden Empress, the Empress, and 2 little girls who didn't quite see eye to eye. As for the people from the Yu family, they had already returned after the event. At that time, Yuan Shi had already cried to his heart's content. So many people, but they're all acquaintances, so it won't take up much of my energy. Yun Nuoxing walked to the side of the crowd and laughed self-deprecatingly, shaking his head. Xian and the others also laughed bitterly. If this guy stayed in a group of unfamiliar people, his energy would be exhausted very quickly. After laughing for a while, Yun Nuoxing's gaze swept across the crowd. Being stared at by 17 pairs of eyes, he still felt a little uncomfortable. He rubbed his cheeks, flipped his palm, and took out an object the size of a washbasin. It looked like an altar, and there were 8 sharp pillars at the edge, curving towards the center. This was the star map that Xian had given to him. During these years of traveling in the realm of the gods, besides picking up 2 fragments at the Tana's water god temple, Yun Nuoxing would occasionally take a detour to collect fragments of the star map. However, he didn't manage to fix it, but it seemed like it could be activated. Look, there are so many of us here. There are even 8 emperor gods here. I want to try this thing. Yun Nuoxing laughed dryly. This thing has the smell of a coordinate formation. Could it be that it can be transported through coordinates? When Yishi saw this thing, she immediately smelled something different. She was the only formation master present, so she knew more about this kind of thing. It's a little different. It's said that you can go anywhere you want, and you can teleport anywhere in the realm of the gods. However, it's damaged. Yun Nuoxing nodded and grinned. Everyone nodded, but when they heard the last sentence, they were stunned. Huh! Let's go. Yun Nuoxing laughed softly and placed his other hand lightly on the star map. A wisp of silver-blue energy flowed from his body into the star map, and then it shone brightly. No, wait. In the bright light, a series of shrill screams rang out. Chapter 587. This was a sparkling and pure white world. The twin suns in the sky seemed a little sickly here. Even the sunlight looked lazy as it landed on the ground. Before it could stand firm, it was pushed away by the merciless icy blue ground. Not only this piece of land, but the icy blue ground that spanned an unknown distance was also like this, rejecting the sunlight. His line of sight shifted slightly. Numerous ice-blue mountain peaks silently appeared on the horizon. They were as smooth and clean as mirrors. They stood in this ice-blue world and formed a continuous stretch. A breeze blew through the air. The water molecules condensed into ice crystals and fell to the ground before disappearing. This was a world of ice. There were no living creatures, and even the sunlight didn't want to stay here for long. There was only ice that remained unchanged for tens of thousands of years. The ground was frozen, and the mountains were frozen. It was bone-chilling cold without a trace of warmth. Even the air was trembling, as if it would freeze at any time. At this moment, a dozen or so people were standing on the mountainside of a towering mountain peak that reached into the clouds. Powerful auras circulated around them, resisting the cold aura. However, their eyes seemed to be a little sluggish. A cold wind blew past, causing their long hair to flutter, and their minds to be in a mess. Is this the Southern Ice Realm or the Northern Ice Realm? Northern Ice Realm. I've confirmed it. We've just entered a little. Just a little. As soon as the golden-robed girl spoke, the color-haired young man beside her quickly took out a large map and said casually, "A little?" Everyone's expression was strange. They glanced at the map and then took in a deep breath of cold air. They were already halfway into the Northern Ice Realm. The North Ice Realm was even larger than a origin region. It stretched from the leftmost origin region to the rightmost origin region. Just like the South Ice Realm, it was one of the 2 most mysterious regions in the God Realm. What's this? Compared to where we were at the beginning, isn't it quite close? Yes, it's much closer. Yun Nuoxing laughed. However, when she saw the murderous looks on everyone's faces, she couldn't help but shiver. Luckily, I didn't send it to the Ice World's divine realm. This place isn't far from there. The Golden Empress pointed at the red dot they were at and moved it to the upper right corner. Then, she raised her head and said, "We have to leave quickly. Once an ice storm blows in the North and South Ice Realms, it's easy to get lost in the ice plains. Moreover, the temperature here is extremely low. It can even freeze a divine underworld powerhouse. So, you little fellows better not wander off." When she said this, Empress Jean was looking at Yun Nuoxing. In the end, she was the one who worried the most and had the most headaches. In the past thousands of years, she had either guided or personally taught batches of disciples, but she had never seen such a troublemaker. Rather than calling him a troublemaker, it was more like casual. It was hard to speak to him in a lecturing tone, and he couldn't put on any airs. Once he did, he would only nod his head mechanically, and the words would go in one ear and out the other. Yun Nuoshing shrunk her head and stuck her tongue out, as if she was really being lectured by her elder sister. As for whether she really listened, the Golden Empress didn't know. Yun Nuoshing also quickly took out the golden chains and tied them firmly around the waists of Xian and the others. Then, he hugged Yi Shi and nodded. He looked at the Golden Empress and smiled. "All right?" Seeing this, the Golden Empress sighed softly and nodded. She placed her hand on his arm and pulled him up into the air. There was a series of clattering sounds behind them, and everyone quickly followed. In the world of ice and snow, in the vast white world, spatial cracks were constantly being torn open. A dozen figures flew past, and the cracks quickly closed. In the distance, in a place that was also blindingly white, a spatial crack was being torn open and closed again. This repeated for a few days. This group of people kept tearing open space in this snow-white world, crossing countless distances. The sky was black and white and black again. However, the days seemed to be longer, which made Yun Nuoshing very curious. Everywhere in the realm of the gods had 4 distinct seasons, and day and night were equally divided. However, in the North Ice realm, the nights seemed to be much shorter. After an unknown amount of time, Yun Nuoshing took out the treasure map and immediately found the location of the red dot. When she saw where it was, she let out a long sigh of white smoke. They had been walking for many days, but the distance changed abnormally slowly. She originally thought that with the Golden Empress and the others, and with the strength of the God Emperors, they would only need 1 or 2 days to reach the border between the Sourcepeak region and the North Ice realm. She didn't expect that after so many days, they still hadn't flown out. Am I hallucinating? Why do I feel that it's getting colder and colder? Rubbing his arm under the windbreaker, Yun Nuoshing frowned. He touched his colorful hair and felt a strange warmth when he touched it. There was no frost, but the golden chain that extended from the space of the windbreaker already had a thin layer of ice on its surface. It looked very smooth and hard. She waved her hand back and forth for a while and touched an object that was so cold that it seemed to be frozen. She was shocked and moved her hand away as if she had been electrocuted. At the same time, she turned her head in shock and saw that Xian was also looking at her. She then smiled sweetly, which seemed to make the cold space seem a little warmer. Looking at the Golden Empress who was flying half a meter in front of her, Yun Nuoshing blinked and retreated a little. She came to Xian's side and grabbed her hand that was as cold as ice. She held her hand in her palm and gently rubbed it. It was very cold, but very soft. There was no trace of affection in her heart, as if it was just a habit for her to do this. Xian's beautiful face blushed a little as her hand was gently rubbed by a pair of warm palms. A trace of tenderness flashed through Mei Mao's eyes. However, she looked a little guilty as she glanced at Qin Yen, who was on the right side of Yun Nuoshing. The latter also felt her gaze and turned to look at her. Then, she looked at Yun Nuoshing, who was blowing air into her hand, and looked at Xian indifferently. She smiled faintly and didn't say anything. Something's not right. Suddenly, the Golden Empress stopped. Her jade hand grabbed the void in front of her and tore open a crack. She took the lead and rushed out. Yun Nuoshing and the others behind her were dumbfounded. They looked at each other and quickly rushed out of the void. In the white world, the sun was slightly lazy. It hung slanted in the sky and flickered from time to time. The sun didn't seem to be very warm. Other than making people feel dazzled, it didn't seem to have any other effect. Even when it shone on the body, it didn't dispel the coldness. On the snowy ground below, on the desolate snowy ground, there was a stockade. Some adults wearing animal skins were sitting in the stockade, and some children were running and playing in the snow. Their small feet moved up and down, leaving ankle-high footprints. For the first time, this desolate place had the aura of life. This place that seemed like a world of ice and snow was actually inhabited by people. Yun Nuoshing was very surprised. She turned her head and saw the Golden Empress's gloomy face. She couldn't help but be startled. "Sister Jean, this is the 6th time we've passed by this stockade. I thought we were passing by another stockade, but this time I can feel it clearly. It can't be wrong. This is definitely the same stockade." The Golden Empress's face was gloomy. They were constantly tearing space and walking in the void. How could they encounter such a thing? Hearing this, Yun Nuashing quickly took out the treasure map. When she opened it, she gasped in cold air. It was so cold that her teeth chattered. Everyone was shocked. They stretched their necks and saw a red dot on the map of the North Ice Realm. It wasn't very far from the center. How can this be? I clearly planned to walk in the direction of the Sourcepeak domain. Why did I walk in the direction of the Ice Realm? The Golden Empress saw that the red dot didn't approach the Sourcepeak domain at all. Instead, it was approaching the center of the North Ice Realm. Her face changed slightly. Mei Mao kept flashing. Yun Nuashing also frowned slightly. She looked up at the sun. Her soul power gushed out. It went into the void and came out again. She didn't encounter anything special. It didn't seem like she was going around in circles. I just looked at the map in the void. We were clearly close to the Sourcepeak domain. Why did we approach the center of the North Ice Realm after coming out of the void? Yun Nuashing frowned and thought. After thinking for a while, Yun Nuashing sighed and shook her head. She took out the dark ruined sword from her body and handed it to the Golden Empress. She said, "Sister Jean, take the dark ruined sword and walk again." Hearing this, the Golden Empress took the dark ruined sword without thinking. The dark ruined sword had the ability to destroy space. There shouldn't be any problems. She didn't waste any time. The dark ruined sword cut through space like tofu. She brought everyone into the void. However, what shocked everyone was that after more than 2 hours, when the Golden Crown Princess felt that something was wrong and came out of the void, she saw the stockade again. It was still in the same position, and the surrounding terrain had not changed at all. Everyone frowned. It seemed that something big had happened this time. A group of Emperor gods with a divine sword that could destroy space were actually trapped in the Ice Realm? Everyone discussed for a while. Then, they turned around and flew back in the direction they came from. They tore through space, but the result didn't change at all. They didn't know how long they had traveled, but they saw the village again. Everyone was on the verge of breaking down. Yun Nuashing was also a little stunned. After all, he was the one who brought everyone into the North Ice Realm. Now that they were in such a situation, he didn't know what to say. He wanted to use the star map to teleport out again, but he found that it didn't work. Even the teleportation formation couldn't be activated. Just as he was thinking about what to do, he suddenly felt an ice-cold body burrowing into his embrace, causing him to be stunned. He lowered his head, only to see Little Moon burying her little face into his chest. Her delicate body trembled slightly, and 2 pieces of ice-like things stroked his back. It was so cold that he shivered violently, and it took him a long time to get used to it. Why is your body so cold?" Yun Nuashing was shocked. It wasn't just his back. Even the soft body that was pressed against his body was extremely cold. It was like an ice cube. He could even feel that her vital signs were showing signs of weakening. The temperature here is frighteningly low. Even energy protection isn't that effective. Moreover, the temperature is still gradually dropping. I don't know if you've noticed, but every time the sun rises and sets, the temperature will drop by a certain degree. Moreover, this temperature is enough to freeze the air. However, Jingyu said softly. Yun Nuashing was shocked. He had 4 divine flames protecting his body. Ordinary cold naturally couldn't affect him. He originally thought that he would be affected if the temperature was a little more abnormal. He didn't expect that he wouldn't feel anything at all when the temperature had already dropped below absolute zero. However, just because he didn't feel anything didn't mean that others didn't feel anything. Turning around, Yun Nuoxing's heart sank when he saw everyone's expressions. Apart from the god emperors, Feng and Little White, Xian and the others were all slightly curled up. There was a faint trace of sleepiness on their faces. Yun Nuoxing panicked. He hurriedly released his divine flames. The light purple night dark flame, the light gray Yin spirit flame with a hint of blue, and the brown mountain spirit flame all appeared. They condensed into a flame barrier that enveloped everyone. The temperature also quietly rose, causing everyone who was about to fall asleep to quickly wake up. He gave Yuan Shi and Nightmare a hard knock on their head. He gently shook Qin Yan, Xian, and Little Yu to prevent them from falling asleep. If you release your divine flames like this, you will be drained dry before we can get out. Little White sneered when he saw his actions. Yun Nuoxing's eyelids trembled slightly. He lowered his eyes slightly, but he smiled and said, "It's fine. I have a way to hold on. Even if using the divine flames consumes a lot of energy, I only need to maintain this small area. It doesn't consume too much energy. I think I can hold on for half a month. We will be able to get out in half a month." Little White looked deeply at him. He crossed his arms and looked noble and proud. Although he only looked like a young man, no one knew how old he was. After a moment, Little White's body lit up slightly. His body swayed, and he turned into a huge white tiger that was 5 meters long. Dark blue stripes covered his body. "Come on up. I will save some energy to bring you guys along." Little White's huge tiger eyes looked at Yun Nuoxing and the others. His rumbling voice echoed in their ears. Yun Nuoxing looked at him in amusement. At the beginning, he was very resistant. After forming a soul contract with him, he was completely different from when they first met. Everyone sat on him without hesitation. It was the white tiger, one of the 4 divine beasts. They never thought that they would be able to sit on him one day. However, it was a little crowded with more than 10 people sitting together. Little White wanted to make his body bigger, but Feng reached out her hand and patted him. Then, a loud phoenix cry sounded from her small mouth. Her alluring body also changed in a flash. She turned into a huge red bird that was covered in crimson-pink flames. Her 3 dazzling tails were extremely bright. Even her feathers were suffused with a strange luster. After Feng changed into her original form, she used her huge beak to pick up Yun Nuoxing and threw him on her back. She also pulled Xian, Qin Yan, and the other girls over. The Golden Princess also sat beside him. Yun Nuoxing's expression was a little strange. That night, he sat on Feng back and roamed the sky. It felt really good. However, ever since Feng turned into a human, he didn't let her change back into her original form. He had been using the Netherworld Ruins sword to travel. Now that he was sitting on her back again, he felt strange. "Feng, Little White, go to that village and take a look. We have returned here so many times. There must be something strange about it." Chapter 588. In the world of ice and snow, 2 huge figures descended from the sky. Their shadows on the ground grew larger and larger, and within these shadows, there seemed to be the shadows of other people. The 2 gigantic shadows landed on the snowy ground and gradually enlarged. The children who were running all over the snowy ground looked up curiously when they saw the gradually enlarging shadows. When they saw the 2 gigantic objects, they all cried out in shock. They turned around and ran back into the village. As they ran, their little mouths were still shouting randomly. The giant divine bird and divine tiger that had landed in the distance saw the children screaming and running back to the village. They looked at each other and shook their heads helplessly. Only when the people behind them had landed did they transform back into their human forms. Yun Nuoxing landed on the snowy ground and looked at the crowd. He clasped his hands together and blew a puff of white smoke into his palms. They did not land immediately. After Yun Nuoxing's suggestion, they traveled through the void for a long time before they had no choice but to stop. "Let's go and take a look." There's no need for so many people to go together. It's too scary, Yun Nuoshing said to the Golden Princess after he took a deep breath and looked at the people around him. We're not afraid of anything happening if we do things openly. Are you still worried that the residents of this godforsaken place can threaten you? The Golden Princess looked at him and rejected him. Then, she waved her hand and took the lead to walk towards the village. Yun Nuoshing smiled bitterly and helplessly lifted his feet from the snowy ground and followed her. Xian and the others also hurriedly followed behind. The people in the village had long been attracted by the children's screams. When they heard the children's screams, they frowned slightly. However, they finally understood that there were people who came to this world of ice and snow. They looked at each other and actually walked towards the village's main entrance. Before Yun Nuoshing and the others reached the entrance, they saw many figures walking out of the village. All of them were wearing thick and heavy animal fur coat. Their exposed foreheads and eyebrows were covered in a layer of frost. A few of them were even holding thick ice pickaxes. There was even a layer of ice at the tip of the pickaxes, as though they had just been fished out of the water and were frozen. Hey, do you think we're here to cause trouble? She nudged Yun Nuoshing with his elbow and whispered. This. Yun Nuoshing laughed dryly, then said, Isn't there a saying that those who come have ill intentions, and those with good intentions don't come? Everyone's face darkened. However, when the people in the stockade saw that Yun Nuoshing's group was wearing so little and had such an extraordinary temperament, they immediately knew that they were not ordinary people. A few young people even ran into the stockade and soon invited an old man over. Friends from afar, are you heading to the ice world's divine realm? This old man was not dressed in thick animal skin like the others. He was only dressed in simple and plain green clothes. He held a walking stick made of ice in his hand. His back was straight and there was a warm smile on his aged face, but it gave people a fierce feeling. His eyes were not turbid, and he looked straight at the group of people from Yun Nuo planet who were slowly walking over, as if he was examining them. Ice World's divine realm? When Yun Nuoshing heard that, she shook her head with a bitter smile. She quickened her pace and walked 3 meters in front of the group. She said softly, We lost our way in the snow. We passed by here many times, but we couldn't get out. We had no choice but to stop and disturb everyone. Aren't you going to the ice world's divine realm? The old man turned his gaze and looked Yun Nuoshing up and down for a while. He was a little surprised. We just want to get out of here as soon as possible. Yun Nuoshing waved her hand with a bitter smile. She just wanted to return to the Taiyuan domain as soon as possible. This damned place was cold and desolate. Even her star power was gradually unable to protect her. She had to release her divine flame to resist the terrifying chill. She did not want to stay in this place for even a second longer. Seeing her bitter expression, the old man looked at her deeply. Then, he looked at the group of people who were standing behind Yun Nuoshing. Then, he waved his hand, turned around and said, Come with me. As he turned around and walked into the village, the crowd of onlookers quickly parted to make a path for him. Then, they took another look at Yun Nuoshing and the others and whispered about something. Then, they gradually dispersed. It seemed that they were not interested in this group of people. It was as if they had already gotten used to it. Yun Nuoshing turned around and looked at the Golden Princess with a questioning gaze. The latter also looked at him and nodded. Then, everyone jogged into the village and followed closely behind the old man. The architectural style of this small village was very different from the buildings Yun Nuoshing usually saw. Even the small village he had seen in the northern wasteland was different from this place. The windows of the buildings here were very small, probably to keep out the wind and cold. There were also some fire elements rising in the buildings. It could be a furnace or something like that. After walking with the old man for a while, they came to a place near the center of the village and followed him into a small house. A warm feeling suddenly descended on them, making everyone heave a sigh of relief. They suddenly felt warm in the extreme cold. That comfortable feeling was indescribable. "It's so warm." Yor and Little Moon let out a long cry as soon as they came in. Now that they saw the furnace fire, they were even more excited, as if they had found a priceless treasure. They quickly ran over and squatted in front of the furnace fire. They stretched out their fair, jade-like hands. The light from the fire shone on their enchanted faces, making them feel as if they were going to ascend to heaven. The old man turned around and looked at them. There was a hint of gentleness in his old eyes. He asked them to take a seat and walked into the cubicle. After a long time, he came out with a plate and a dozen wooden teacups, placing them in front of everyone. "Drink, it will warm your bodies. Although I know that you are not ordinary people, it is also good for you." After putting down the teacups, the old man placed the frozen walking stick outside the door. Then, he sat in front of everyone and picked up a teacup to take a sip. Yun Nuashing picked up the teacup and took a look inside. It was a black liquid with a medicinal smell. Just the smell alone was a little bitter. He secretly looked around and saw that everyone was drinking it without any hesitation. His cheeks trembled involuntarily. He steeled his heart and poured the black liquid down his throat. "What, it's so bitter." As soon as the black liquid entered his mouth, Yun Nuashing's head exploded with a bang. It was so bitter that his handsome face scrunched up. However, from the corner of his eye, he saw that no one had any reaction. It was not good for him to show it. He could only force himself to swallow it. But while he was forcing himself not to show it, Xian, Princess Jean, and the others were also crying out in their hearts. However, when they saw that no one else had any reaction, they all endured it and did not say anything. I have seen many people like you who have not lived on the ice field before. However, this is the first time I have seen people like you who have entered the ice field without any preparation. The old man saw that they were all calm and could not help but chuckle. He did not need to guess to know that these people were all enduring it. They were already used to drinking medicinal tea and did not feel anything. However, for people like Yun Nuashing who drank it for the first time, how could they not feel bitter? "Old sir, where is this place?" Yun Nuashing asked. He originally wanted to ask why there were people living in this world of ice and snow, but after thinking about it, he changed his question. "Outsiders call this place the North Ice World. Perhaps it is what you call it. However, we only know that there is a place called the Ice World Divine Realm. Moreover, within a radius of 10,000 miles, there is only one small village," the old man said softly. The old man's name was Han. He only had one word, and did not even seem to have a surname. It was quite suitable for this place. In this world of ice and snow, it was bone-chillingly cold. This small village had existed for many years, and no one had ever walked out of this place. They had always lived in this place. There was also a forest near the village. That was the source of their livelihood. In the past 100 years, there have always been people who have come to this place. You are not the first batch and will definitely not be the last. I originally thought that you were also here for the Ice World Divine Realm, because people who come here will definitely pass by here and then go to the Ice World Divine Realm." Old Han poured another cup of medicinal tea for everyone. Everyone's cheeks twitched when they saw this. However, this medicinal tea was really not that cold after drinking it. There was a warm current wandering around in their bodies. "What kind of place is the Ice World Divine Realm?" Yun Nuashing did not ask why they had to pass by here. After all these years of experience, this kind of situation was nothing more than a huge array or barrier underground. However, even he and Yi Shi did not sense it. It was likely that the level of this array was quite high. "I don't know. However, if you want to go out and walk towards the back of this house. You will reach there and you will not encounter the situation of going around in circles." Old Han shook his head. "But Mr. Han, we only want to go out. We don't want to go to the Ice World Divine Realm." Yun Nuashing smiled bitterly. Hearing this, Old Han took a deep look at him again. Then, he looked at everyone who had been silent all this time. It was as if he was the main person. "Oh, then you have to go to the ice world's divine domain. Since you have come here, you can only go to the ice world's divine domain. Whether you want to go or not, that is the only way to leave this world of ice and snow." Old Han sighed and said faintly, "This." Yun Nuoshing hesitated when he heard this. He had been to many strange places. Now that he heard this so-called ice world divine realm, he did feel some resistance in his heart. He did not really want to go. This is the only way to leave this place. More than 10 years ago, a group of people also went to the ice world divine realm. After they came here and got the direction, they left. A few years later, they came here again. I only found out from them that they had left this place before, Old Han said softly. Seeing the hesitation on Yun Nuoshing's face, Princess Jean smiled. She put down the teacup in her hand and said, "Then let's go. It's fine to rest for a night. Let's go and take a look tomorrow. We have been walking for so long. We can still hold on, but you," Princess Jean stopped and pointed beside Yun Nuoshing. He was stunned. He turned his head and looked at Xian and Qin Yen, as well as Yuan Shi, Nightmare, Yu and Qin Yu. They had all fallen asleep at some point. After staying in the cold place for so long, they seemed to be much more relaxed when they came to a warm place. "Well, you can rest in this hall. I will go and find some blankets and food. There is only one room here, so it is not easy to entertain guests. If you want to walk around the village, don't disturb others." Old Han nodded. He stood up from the chair and walked towards the stairs at the door. Yun Nuoshing shrugged indifferently. Xian and the others were all asleep. It was fine as long as there was a place to rest. Those who were more demanding would get a backrest. They wandered outside all year round and would only lie on the bed occasionally. Most of the time, they rested on the netherworld ruins sword, or set up a tent in the mountains and slept on the ground. Some didn't sleep at all and just cultivated for a night. However, Yun Nuoshing wanted to walk around the village. The harsh living conditions in the North Ice Realm were fine for them. They just didn't know why the temperature was getting lower and lower. However, for ordinary people, the living conditions here were very harsh. Perhaps they relied on the forest to survive. When he saw that there was a small human settlement in this cold place, he was naturally curious and wanted to take a look. However, he was like a human-shaped pillow now. As soon as he found that Xian and Qin Yen, who were sitting on either side of him, had fallen asleep, their bodies leaned over, and their heads slid down to rest on his left and right shoulders. Their pleasant body fragrance made him feel a little helpless. "You should rest too. Don't worry, we are here." Princess Jean smiled and reached out to rub his head. "Forget it, it is better for me to sleep less." Yun Nuoshing smiled bitterly and shook his head. He needed Xian, Feng Er, and Lexin and Jingyu to stay by his side when he slept. Otherwise, he would be trapped in the nightmare. He might as well sleep less, although he was a little tired now. Moreover, the ice spear in his body was slightly shaken after he stepped into this world of ice and snow. The cold feeling flowed through his body from time to time, making him shiver every time. Chapter 589. What do you want to tell me? In the spiritual world, a splendid sea of fire rose and fell. It was like a world of fire, but strangely it didn't feel hot. It only made people feel very warm. Not far away, a huge purple lotus flower stood on the sea of fire. It wasn't moved by the waves of fire at all. Yun Nuoshing sat cross-legged at the center of the lotus. An icy blue spear was placed horizontally on his legs. Cold air rose in spirals, but it couldn't reduce the temperature here. Not far from the purple lotus flower, there was an exquisite white jade table. Ziyi and Lan Xen sat on the white jade chairs. They picked up the teacups on the table and took a sip. Then, 2 pairs of Mei Mao stared at the person in the center of the lotus flower with sparkling eyes. Yun Nuoshing's palm gently caressed this huge ice spear that was 3 meters long. He seemed to have thought of its previous owner, the guy who said that it was his soul fragment. He appeared inexplicably, said some inexplicable words, and then disappeared on his own. The Nethervoid sword hung quietly on his back. He had entered the spiritual world because he had sensed the ice spear's call. He didn't expect it to be able to speak like the Nethervoid sword, but he did want to know why it was calling him. The ice spear trembled slightly and slowly floated up. The sharp spearhead pointed at his purple-red pendant. Then, with a flash of light, the treasure map was taken out of the pendant and spread out. Yun Nuoshing looked at it strangely. He took the treasure map and spread it out in front of him. The ice spear also turned and pointed at the North Ice Realm. To be precise, it pointed at the top right corner of the red dot. There was a huge circle drawn there, the location of the Ice Realm. Then, he drew a circle there and pointed at the center a few times. "You want me to go there?" Yun Nuoshing asked strangely. The ice spear fell down, as if it was nodding, which made Yun Nuoshing's strange expression even more. Although he still wanted to ask something, the ice spear had already turned into a ray of light and retracted back into his body, making him laugh bitterly. "What a spiritual spear!" Yun Nuoshing muttered. She took the Nethervoid sword from her back and placed it in front of her. She flicked it with her finger and let out a long sigh. When a weapon reaches the level of eternal divine weapon, it will give birth to its own intelligence, but that's all. The cultivation method of weapons is a little similar to the cultivation method of the human race. From the first, second, and third levels of the mortal rank, the first, second, and third levels are the immortal rank, the fourth, fifth, and sixth levels are the devil rank, the seventh, eighth, and ninth levels are the divine rank, and the 10th, 11th, and 12th levels are the divine rank, which is the eternal divine weapon. The biggest change in each level of weapon is not its power, but its intelligence, the Nethervoid sword said softly. Weapons of the 10th and 11th level can be made by humans, but weapons of the 12th level can only be made by gods and super blacksmiths. At this time, Ziyi and Lan Xian walked over on the waves of fire and sat down beside the lotus. Lan Xian leaned against Yun Nuoshing intimately and smiled. She said, "The most important level of cultivation is the initial divine weapon. The divine weapons of the first level are divided into divine weapons from the first level to the 9th level. Brother Nuoshing's weapons are mostly at the 8th or 9th level. There are fewer weapons at the first 3 levels. Brother Nuoshing's eternal divine weapon is at the 12th level. If you want to make a weapon like the Nethervoid sword, I don't know how to do it. At least, I don't know how to do it," Ziyi said seriously. Ziyi said seriously. Suddenly, he spread out his hands and sighed, causing a black line to hang down from Yun Nuoshing's forehead. Yun Nuoshing sighed gloomily. He hugged Lan Xian gently and rested his chin on her head. He looked like he had a lot on his mind. Lan Xian lifted her head and moved her body into his arms. She opened her mouth, but after a while she pressed it into a tight line. She didn't say anything. Ziyi sat quietly beside them. Mei Mao glanced at him from time to time and then looked away. This young man had a lot on his mind all day long. He had even blocked the transmission of messages in his heart, so she couldn't feel what was troubling him. She wanted to ask, but when she saw his gloomy face, she didn't want to say anything. Although she knew that he would tell them if they asked, she didn't want him to say it unwillingly. "I went out. I'll come back in later." After sitting quietly for a long time, Yun Nuoshing sighed and let go of Lan Xian. He slowly stood up and looked at the darkness outside the world of flames. He sighed again. "Brother Nuoshing." Just as Yun Nuoshing was about to let his consciousness return to his body, Xian gently called out to him, asking him to stop. He lowered his head, only to see her smiling sweetly. Her hands were on his shoulders, and she stood on her tiptoes. Her bright and clean forehead gently touched his forehead. Yun Nuoshing closed his eyes and hugged her waist gently. Both of them had a faint smile on their faces. They just closed their eyes and listened to each other's breathing. There was no romantic thought. After a while, Xian slowly let go of him. Yun Nuoxing smiled and rubbed her soft long hair. The heaviness in his heart was lifted by her again. He sighed softly and looked at Ziyi with a smile. Then, he disappeared. When his consciousness returned to the outside world, Yun Nuoxing was surprised to see that 3 beautiful women were sitting behind the sofa he was sitting on. They were Feng Er and Lixin. It seemed that they thought he was asleep when they saw him closing his eyes. When his consciousness returned from the spiritual world, Xian and the others also woke up. It was already late. They saw Elder Han bring out a pot of hot things and invite them to dinner. They didn't stand on ceremony. However, when Yun Nuoxing saw the pots and pans filled with pieces of things that were red and his nose smelled a strange smell, he felt an inexplicable resistance in his heart. Throughout the meal, he rolled his eyes and pinched his nose as he gulped down water. Fortunately, there were only a few candles in the room. Combined with the faint moonlight, the room was still dark. He could only see a dozen or so figures, but it was difficult to see the expressions on their faces. Early the next morning, everyone bid farewell to Elder Han and rushed toward the ice realm. They had enough of this world of ice and snow. They couldn't wait to return to the Taiyuan domain. However, after rushing out for a while, Yun Nuoxing hurriedly lay on the snow and washed his mouth with water element desperately. He almost vomited out what he ate last night. Everyone looked at each other when they saw him like this. They didn't know what was going on. Last night's blood sausage. Ugh! Thinking of what he ate last night, Yun Nuoxing's handsome face turned pale. He retched a few times. Unfortunately, it had already been digested. Ordinary people in cold places eat blood sausage. You will often see this in the cities bordering the Taiyuan domain and the North Ice Realm. Princess Jean couldn't help but laugh when she saw him retching, causing him to roll his eyes. Yun Nuoxing retched until countless sparkling stars appeared in his eyes. He only felt dizzy and was afraid that he would faint in the next second. Feng Er transformed into her original form and carried him on her back. Everyone then continued on their way. Feng Er and Little White's speed was not much slower than Princess Jean and the others. Furthermore, with their help, their speed could be said to be chasing after the stars and the moon. The abnormally cold air had unknowingly returned to normal. Although the temperature here was still high enough to freeze the air, it had little effect on them. Princess Jean looked at the treasure map and heaved a sigh of relief when she saw that the direction that old Han pointed was not wrong. Sitting on Feng Er's back, Mei Mao looked at the scenery that had been stretched into long thin lines. On this snowy journey, no one spoke. It seemed that they had all lost their previous vitality. They all sat quietly, either resting or cultivating. Even Yun Nuoxing, who was usually restless, was lying quietly on Feng Er's back. He was hugging little Yishi, who was sleeping soundly. Beside him was Xian, who was also staring blankly at the sky. Screech. After an unknown amount of time, perhaps as long as 10 days, or perhaps as long as 3 days, Feng Er suddenly let out a long screech. Everyone was stunned. Almost reflexively, they stood up and activated their qi. In an instant they were in a battle stance. Yun Nuoxing even pulled out his Nethervoid sword and Linghong sword. Feng Er's screech was to alert them that something might happen. At this time, Feng Er had already stopped. She was flapping her wings at a constant frequency. Waves of hot qi were slowly spreading out. Yun Nuoxing was standing at the edge of the battlefield, vigilantly looking around. But soon, his eyes also froze as he stared down. There was a snowy mountain range, covered by an energy barrier that spanned an unknown number of miles. Fine snowflakes were falling on that transparent barrier, then quickly slid down. At the front of the barrier, in front of 2 huge mountain peaks, a huge gate stood there quietly. It was a gate that was completely made of ice and snow. There were many strange patterns protruding from the ice door, and there was an extremely huge keyhole in the center, but it was covered by ice and snow. This huge door seemed to have stood here for countless years, and it was heavy and majestic. There was a terrifying aura circulating on the door, and even though they were far away, when they saw this huge door, that heavy aura felt like it was on them, making it hard for them to breathe. In the place where the mountains were used as a barrier and covered by a huge energy barrier, a brilliant violet light beam shot out from the mountains, straight into the sky. Beside this light beam, there were spiral-shaped energy flow tracks, as well as groups of large and small gravel that were slowly revolving around the light beam. Among those gravel, there was one that weighed more than 10 million Jin. It was unknown what kind of power made it float in the air, quietly revolving around the light beam. That should be the Ice World Divine Realm. Inside there should be the center of the Ice World Divine Realm, which is also the center of the North Ice World. The Golden Empress looked at the energy barrier that covered an unknown area. She pointed at the purplish-blue light pillar and said softly, "Let's go down. We are still 100 miles away from the Ice World Divine Realm, but the pressure is already so great. If we get any closer, we probably won't be able to fly in the air anymore." Princess Jean sighed. Yun Nuoxing nodded and patted Feng Air. Then, she waved at Little White. The two of them understood and quickly descended. They passed through the thick clouds until they reached the ground. Only then did everyone see how big the gate was. It was really like a huge gate that stood between heaven and earth. They could already see its shape when they were high up in the sky. Now that they were closer, they were like ants looking up at a towering tree. The wind and snow swirled in the air. Everyone stepped on the thick snow that reached their knees and walked to the front of the huge gate. Along the way, they found many corpses. They were frozen by the extremely low temperature here and did not rot. From the clothes and accessories, it was hard to tell when these people died. These people should have died more than 10 years ago. Princess Jean exhaled a long puff of white smoke. She stood up and looked at the corpse in front of her. She sighed and said, "Moreover, they were Emperor Gods. They were at the peak of the Emperor God level. They were infinitely close to that level. I have been at the peak of the Emperor God level for 5 eras. I came to the Ice World Divine Realm to seek the path of God. I lived alone in the Ice World for 2 eras, but I never saw the gate of God open. Until the end of my life, I was still unable to take that step. I had no choice but to bury myself in front of the North Gate of God." These were the words carved beside one of the corpses. It seemed to be expressing his unwillingness. The biting cold wind blew down with snowflakes. It was like the lament of the dead, narrating their tragedy. Yun Nuoxing squatted down in front of a corpse that was closest to the huge gate. He saw that the corpse's palm was covering the wall beside it. He silently said, "I have sinned," and gently moved the corpse away. The pile of snow slid down and revealed a frozen stone. There was a line of words on it. Moreover, it was the language of the current era. "The Gate of God in the North. The Supreme God from the ancient past sleeps here." It was a very simple sentence, but it made everyone who hurried over to take a look suck in a breath of cold air. Of course, they knew what the God of Heaven was referring to. It was precisely because they knew that they were shocked. This Ice World's divine domain is the entire Ice World Divine Realm, the burial ground of that God. Yun Nuoxing took a deep breath and wiped the sweat on his forehead. A simple sentence was like a divine attack that descended on him. It made his heart beat faster. In this cold place, he was sweating. Ding! Suddenly, Yun Nuoxing saw that his entire right arm had turned icy blue. That bone-piercing cold caused the already extremely low temperature here to drop another level. The Golden Princess and the Empress, who were closest to him, shuddered violently. They hurriedly turned their heads and were shocked when they saw the changes on his body. "This is—" Yun Nuoxing was also stunned. He hurriedly raised his right hand and made a grabbing motion in the air. Then, a long ice spear that was about 10 feet long appeared in his hand. The ice-blue spear shaft and spearhead flickered with a strange golden color. The golden hue was like a stream of water flowing through the ice spear. Very quickly, it covered the entire spear. At the same time, it gently broke free from Yun Nuoxing's hands. Under everyone's nervous gazes, it flew into the sky. Then, it suddenly became a few hundred times bigger. The long spear tip was pointed at the ice and snow door. The ice and snow covering the keyhole automatically fell off and smashed downward. Yun Nuoxing and the rest hurriedly retreated and raised their heads, only to see that the ice spear had already been inserted into the keyhole, like a huge key, twisting. Chapter 590. Click. It was as if a mechanism had been stuck and a button had been pressed. The moment the ice spear twisted, a deep sound came from above. Shortly after, the strange engravings on the ice door lit up with a red glow. They were like earthworms that slowly lit up. Even the huge keyhole was suffused with a dazzling red glow. After the ice spear twisted open the door, it rapidly shrunk and landed in Yun Nuoxing's hand. It didn't retract into his body, but everyone ignored it at this moment. They just watched as the door slowly melted like snow in the red glow. The huge ice door that was tens of thousands of feet tall slowly disappeared. It was as if ice and snow were being melted by the sun. Not a single trace was left behind. The huge ice door disappeared in a minute, as if a freezer that had accumulated cold air for countless years had been opened all of a sudden. The cold wind of the northern lands whistled out and blew on their bodies, making everyone feel as if they were about to suffocate. Their faces were so cold that it hurt. Yun Nuoxing turned around almost reflexively. His huge 6 wings were about 200 feet wide. He suddenly folded them and enveloped everyone in his 6 wings. The bone-piercing cold wind blew on his windbreaker, penetrated it, and landed on his back. It was so cold that he shuddered violently and had goosebumps all over his body. Even his 6 wings were shivering from the cold. It was as if even his soul was about to freeze. However, this cold didn't last for long. Yun Nuoxing suddenly felt a few overbearing and urgent forces rushing into his body. He immediately felt that the cold had disappeared. He quickly heaved a sigh of relief. When he raised his head, he realized that the Golden Princess and the Empress were glaring at him. This made him smile bitterly. Reflexive, really? Not long after, the cold wind whizzed and stopped. Yun Nuoxing heaved a sigh of relief. He retracted his 6 wings and saw a thin layer of ice on his colorful wings. He couldn't help but feel bitter. After being refined by the glazed treasure mirror, his 6 wings could be said to be extremely powerful. They were comparable to a mid-level divine artifact. Furthermore, they were molded from his flesh and blood. He didn't expect them to freeze when the wind blew. If he faced them head-on, his entire body would be frozen. They have been frozen into ice. Xian and Mei Mao hurried over. When they saw his huge 6 wings that had been frozen, their Mei Mao's eyes lit up. They felt that they were worried, but they couldn't see the word worried in their eyes. It's okay. I feel like I am turning into ice crystals with 6 wings. Yun Nuoxing looked at the 6 wings that were completely frozen. He smiled and waved his hand, saying, I have to put them away for a while. If I take them back now, the cold air will enter my body along with the 6 wings. It will also freeze my meridians and body. But it will be fine after I refine it with my divine flames. Seeing that he was still in the mood to joke around, everyone gave a wry smile. Feng Er shook her head slightly, walked a few steps forward, and pressed her jade-like hand on Yun Nuoxing's 6 wings. A scorching red and pink flame rushed out from her palm and completely enveloped his 6 wings. I can handle it myself. Yun Nuoxing smiled bitterly, but he didn't stop Feng Er. He allowed her to burn his wings with her true phoenix fire. The layer of ice also slowly melted under everyone's gaze. It melted into drops of hot liquid that dripped onto the ground and melted the ice and snow. After a while, the 6 wings returned to normal. Yun Nuoxing smiled and rubbed Feng Er's head. The 6 wings flapped and returned to his back. When he saw Xian looking at him nervously, he couldn't help but stick out his tongue and smile. "Alright, stop flirting with each other. Let's go in and take a look." Seeing the two of them flirting with each other, the Golden Princess rolled her eyes in annoyance. However, a trace of envy flashed across Mei Mao's eyes. Everyone nodded and followed the Golden Princess into the god's burial ground. However, this time, Yun Nuoxing didn't walk in front. Obviously, he was worried that an accident would happen. He stood in front again. After the ice and snow gate disappeared, it was still a pure white world. 2 mountain ranges stretched across the 2 sides, forming a straight path. It was a straight and white snow road. After walking through the barrier, the place where the ice and snow gate was originally located had a barrier extending down until the entrance was closed. From the outside, the situation inside couldn't be seen. Inside the barrier, the wind and snow suddenly stopped. Yun Nuoxing suddenly raised his head, but he could only see the energy barrier that was faintly glowing. Looking at the ice spear in his hand, Yun Nuoxing sighed. He stretched out his left hand and flicked the spear's head a few times. He muttered to himself, "What do you want me to see?" This gate was opened by the ice spear, and its former owner was a fragment of its soul. Thinking of this, his heart beat faster. Could it be that this place had something to do with him? That golden figure had also said that if he encountered something unbelievable one day, he shouldn't be too surprised. Maybe it was a gift left behind by someone. Was this the same? He wasn't sure, but he felt that it wasn't that simple. "There's a familiar smell." Ziye's voice suddenly sounded in his mind. The content of her voice gave Yun Nuoxing a fright. A familiar smell? A supreme deity from the remote antiquity era was sleeping here, and she was also sealed in the remote antiquity era. Could it be that Ziyi had some sort of relationship with this deity? Could it be that Ziyi was once her master? Thinking of this, Yun Nuoxing's face became slightly gloomy. He felt an inexplicable sense of loss, as if something he loved was about to disappear. "Idiot, what are you thinking about? There is indeed a strange aura here, and it's a little familiar. I should have seen it before, but it's definitely not Ing Er's aura. His aura is more towards darkness." Ziyi sensed his mood and couldn't help but grumble. Because of the sense of loss in his heart, she didn't feel too good either. "Oh," Yun Nuoxing muttered in his heart. The gloominess on his face disappeared slightly, and the others didn't see anything wrong with it. They didn't know how long they had been walking on the long white road. They could only see the flat energy barrier in the sky getting higher and higher until it seemed to be approaching the highest point. Even the road had come to an end. What appeared in front of them was a huge ice field square. The thick ice surface reflected a faint blue color. In the center of the ice field square, there was a circle that looked like a magic circle carved under the ice. The golden light was very conspicuous in this pure white place. Everyone noticed it at a glance. And in front of the road that led to the icefield square, there was a flight of stairs at the edge of the square. The stairs were made of ice, and on top of the stairs, there was a throne made of ice and snow. Aside from the front, there were 2 more flights of stairs in the middle of the square. They led to the left and right. The 3 flights of stairs were the same height. The only difference was that on the stairs in front of them, there was a throne made of ice and snow. And on the throne, there was a 10-foot-tall diamond-shaped ice block floating. It floated 1 foot above the throne. No one dared to raise their heads. They could feel a scary aura coming from the diamond-shaped ice block. That aura made everyone tremble in fear. Yun Nuoxing's whirlpool zither and 2 god spirit marks were glowing. It was obvious that they were shocked by the aura coming from outside. From the corner of their eyes, they could see a blurry figure in the ice block, but everyone only dared to look at the figure's feet. They did not dare to look up. It was as if looking at the figure's face would bring misfortune. And the face of a god, even if it had passed away for so many years, was not something they could look at whenever they wanted to. Just being 1,000 meters away from it made the few emperor gods feel like their souls were about to collapse. If they looked at it, their souls would scatter. Standing at the edge of the square, where they came from, no one dared to look forward. Even that weird girl, did not dare to breathe loudly under the great pressure. Her small body trembled slightly. Her jade-like legs could not stop shaking. It was as if she could fall over at any moment. Little Moon was the same. However, compared to she gritted her teeth and clenched her jade-like hands. Perhaps it was because she was resisting with all her might, but her face was even paler than Yu-Er's. It made his heart ache. His left hand quickly pulled the two girls to his side. Ling Hong, isolate the space. With a flip of his right hand, the Ling Hong sword appeared in his hand. A ray of silver-blue light surged on his arm. Then, he raised his hand and made a horizontal cut in front of him. Following that horizontal cut, a huge space curtain slowly appeared in midair. It fell from the sky in a circular shape. It completely enveloped the stairs and the throne in front of them, blocking their line of sight. From this space curtain, one could only see a snowy ground. It did not feel out of place at all. However, after isolating the space, the aura that gave Yun Nuoshing and the others great pressure did not disappear. But at this moment, everyone could raise their heads without worry. This was because they could not see the diamond-shaped ice block on the throne of ice and snow. They could not see the figure inside. As long as they could not see it, there was no problem. Only then did Yun Nuoshing raise his head and look around. His gaze inadvertently glanced at the location of the spatial curtain. That place had completely turned into a snow-white flat ground, and nothing could be seen. As if they felt that the pressure from Yun Nuoshing was not that strong, Yu and Little Moon quickly moved closer to him. They grabbed Yun Nuoshing's left and right hands almost at the same time. He was stunned. He lowered his head and saw the two girls staring at each other. The temperature of the air seemed to be rising. Ahem. Yun Nuoshing coughed dryly. The two girls quickly shrunk their heads and stuck out their little tongues. The former shook his head helplessly. He turned his head and raised his chin at Xian and Yuanxi. Then, he took the lead and walked towards the stairs on the left. Princess Jean and the others were not paying attention. When they turned around and saw that they were walking towards the stairs, they turned pale with fright. They quickly rushed over, directly passing Yun Nuoshing and the others. They rushed in front of them and even turned back to glare at them. Yun Nuoshing also stuck out his tongue and shrugged. The stairs were very spacious. It would not be a problem for 10 people to walk side by side. The stairs made of ice were very smooth. No one dared to walk too fast in case they slipped down. After climbing up this flight of stairs, the immense pressure actually weakened a lot. Moreover, the further up they went, the weaker the pressure became. It was not like what they were worried about, where they would be crushed by the aura as soon as they reached the top. At the top of the stairs was a platform that was 20 feet wide. In addition to the stairs behind it, it was as if a platform and stairs had been carved out of a small iceberg. There were some broken ice shards on the platform, as if the iceberg was damaged. However, the small iceberg and the platform in front of them were intact. There were no potholes. The left and right sides are the same. Perhaps that place has research value. Although I am very curious about the deity sealed in the ice. Which deity from the ancient past is he? However, this kind of information is not something that we can come into contact with. Princess Jean turned around and looked at the small iceberg opposite them. From here, she could clearly see the top of the iceberg. Similarly, there was nothing there. It was a pure blue iceberg, a pure iceberg. There was nothing there. Little brother, can you walk up there with the eternal weapon in your hand? The Empress gently rubbed Yun Nuoshing's head and asked softly. Hearing this, Princess Jean also turned around. Mei Mao looked at him expectantly. Everyone was also looking forward to it. They had come to this godforsaken place by accident. However, they did not see anything. Furthermore, they were scared half to death by the aura. They were somewhat unwilling to accept this. Hearing this, Yun Nuoshing sighed softly and shook her head. She said, "Not to mention the eternal weapon, even if I had the Netherworld Ruins sword in its complete state, I might not be able to walk up there. That deity, even though he has passed away for so many years, still emits such a terrifying and majestic aura that directly affects one's soul. I think he probably doesn't want anyone to disturb him. If we force our way up there, our souls might collapse. As for why I opened this door, I am not sure. Furthermore, after I came in, he ignored me. There was no reaction at all." Yun Nuoshing added another sentence. Although everyone was mentally prepared, they were still a little disappointed when they heard the answer. Chapter 591. On the vast icy plaza, Yun Nuoshing and the others wandered aimlessly. Their eyes were unfocused as they looked left and right. Unfortunately, this place was only so big. There was only an icy plaza and 3 steps. Everyone wanted to go up and take a look at the steps in the middle, but they didn't have the courage and could only walk around in circles. Gulp, once again, Yun Nuoshing wandered to the bottom of the steps on the left. He was still holding the hands of a little girl when he suddenly heard a soft sound. It sounded like something heavy was rolling on the ice. The 3 of them were stunned when they heard the sound. They lowered their heads and saw that Yu, who was on their left, seemed to have kicked something. It looked like a broken piece of ice. It was oval in shape, and there were many sinister-looking sharp points on the broken side. Looking at the fracture marks, it seemed to have been smashed. Yun Nuoshing let go of the 2 girls' hands and covered his hands with a thin layer of star power. He picked up the oval ice piece that was less than a meter long and wide. The color of the ice piece was exactly the same as the ice surface. If Yu hadn't kicked it, they wouldn't have noticed it at all. "Big brother Yun, it's just a piece of broken ice. What's there to look at?" Seeing that he was lost in thought as he looked at the oval-shaped piece of broken ice, Yu curled her small mouth and said briskly. Yun Nuoshing shook his head gently. He held the oval piece of broken ice with both hands and walked up the step. He stared at the steps in a daze. Yu and Little Moon hurriedly followed behind him. Their jade-like hands grabbed onto the corners of his clothes, and they also lowered their heads to look at the steps. However, they were muttering in their hearts. They didn't know what he was looking at so absent-mindedly. Found it. After a while, he saw another ice piece of the same size at the edge of the platform at the top. Yun Nuoshing took a deep breath and walked over. He picked it up and looked at the fracture of the 2 ice pieces. After comparing them for a while, he slowly put them together. When the 2 ice pieces were put together, they formed an oval ice piece that was more than a meter tall. Other than an obvious crack, he couldn't see anything else. There were no traces of energy, and it seemed like an extremely ordinary ice piece. Yun Nuoshing was confused when he saw it. "I seem to have understood something." Suddenly, Yun Nuoshing's expression changed slightly. He seemed to have realized something, but it was more like he was shocked. He immediately turned around and ran down the steps with the ice piece in his arms. The 2 girls who were grabbing onto the corners of his clothes were also shocked. They staggered a little when he pulled them, but they hurriedly followed him. In the center of the ice-field square, there were circles of golden light engraved under the ice. It looked like a magic circle, but it wasn't. Yun Nuoshing hurriedly came to the center of the golden circle with the ice piece in his arms. He casually placed it on the ice and ran toward the steps on the right without stopping. When he passed by Xian and the others, he didn't even have time to look at them. The latter and the others were shocked when they saw him in such a hurry and ran after him. Compared to the steps on the left, one was at the top while the other was at the bottom. There were also 2 ice pieces on the right step, but they were placed in the corner at the top. Yun Nuoshing quickly found them. He didn't have time to explain anything to the others. He hurriedly jumped down from the top with the ice piece in his arms. He jumped to the center of the square, quickly arranged the ice piece, and placed it in the golden circle on the ice. Just as the two ice pieces were placed in the golden circle under the ice, which seemed to be dead, suddenly came to life. It began to rotate slowly, and rays of golden light emerged from under the ice. When the people who ran up from behind saw this, they were all stunned. These too are not ice pieces. They are the remains left behind after the energy of a top-grade ice element glazed crystal has been used up. Yun Nuoshing didn't even turn his head. He didn't wait for the others to ask, and he quickly explained. Everyone was shocked. After the energy of a top-grade glazed crystal has been used up, the remains of the glazed crystal will be left behind. I know this, but I have never thought of this. How did you think of this? The Golden Queen looked at Yun Nuoshing in astonishment. She frowned slightly. She had seen top-grade glazed crystals before, but she had never thought of this at all. She didn't think of this at all. Yun Nuoshing pointed at the two ice pieces in the constantly rotating golden circle and said, I only thought of this because I have seen something similar. Don't you think that these two look like eggs? Eggs? Everyone was dumbfounded as they looked at the two oval-shaped objects. Now that he had mentioned it, they seemed to be somewhat similar. Yun Nuoshing nodded. He turned his eyes and looked at Feng Er. Immediately, he smiled gently and said, Feng Er was hatched by me personally. I couldn't be more clear about that scene. It was also because I had held an egg that I thought of this. This top-grade glazed crystal must have bred something in it, but I don't know what it is. And this thing has come out now, Yi Shi said softly. Yi Shi added softly. The Golden Empress and the others also nodded solemnly. If it was really an egg-like object, then this broken glazed crystal carrier was caused when the object hatched. They didn't have to guess for long before the golden circle emerged from the ice. It slowly expanded and enveloped everyone. Gradually, it expanded to cover the entire square and even the three small icebergs. At the same time, a dazzling white light bloomed in front of them. Everyone closed their eyes and felt that the white light was getting brighter and brighter, as if they were standing in front of the sun. The radiant light swallowed everyone. Although he didn't feel any danger, Yun Nuoshing still subconsciously pulled Xian and the others together. He spread his 6 wings, even though he couldn't see, feel, or hear anything. In the bright white space, a muffled voice slowly sounded. It was a man's voice. From the sound of it, it seemed to be a young man. He was whispering continuously. It seemed calm, but it also sounded sorrowful. Yun Nuoshing and the others still couldn't see anything, but images appeared in their minds. Gradually, the voice became much louder. However, the content made Yun Nuoshing and the others tremble. Who am I? I seem to have lost myself. I have lost myself. I don't have a past, and I might not have a future. There are chaotic images flashing in my mind. There are thousands of memories that can't be collected. It's so painful. My body feels like it's falling apart. My bones have turned into powder, my blood is flowing backward, and my soul is dissipating. I wasn't received by the underworld. It's so painful. I want to die. I want to die at this moment. No, that's right. It's not that the underworld didn't receive me, but that I escaped from there. I fell out of the broken reincarnation road and escaped a lifetime of reincarnation. My soul is still there, but I lost almost all my memories. Where is this? The world of the gods? The demon world? The world of the gods? The demon world? Or the lower realm? First, give yourself a name. Bid farewell to your previous life. The name of this life, whatever you see when you open your eyes, that's what it is. 1, 2, 3. When the 3 words fell, the dazzling white in their line of sight gradually weakened. At the same time, Yun Nuoshing and the others felt their eyes slowly opening. What they saw was a curved silver moon. The moon's surface was slanted to the west. The clear moonlight shone down and the sky was slightly dark, as if it was about to rain. The dark clouds were so heavy that even they couldn't breathe. Only the moon broke through the layers of blockage and revealed itself in the empty space. Moon, silver moon, moonlight, the moon's surface facing the west. Upper quarter moon, the moon's surface facing the east. Lower quarter moon, it's decided. In this life, I'll be called quarter moon. This body is so tattered. I forcefully broke free from the reincarnation road and descended into this world, but in the end, I became an 8-year-old child? I'm the ruler of darkness. Darkness flows in my body and soul. To think that this wasn't wiped out by the reincarnation road. Then, the mystic art of this life. Forget it, I won't change it. Book of the Epochs. Let me see, the current time is the beginning of the Great Yuan Realm's 62nd epoch. Not even 100,000 years have passed in this epoch. Is it because I escaped from the reincarnation road, that's why my reincarnation time is so long? In the end, I still couldn't completely escape from reincarnation. Less than 10% of my memories are left. Sigh, in this life I'll definitely. His voice abruptly stopped here, and the round moon in his line of sight also dimmed and disappeared. When they opened their eyes again, everyone was in a daze. The golden ring had already returned to normal. Its light dimmed and disappeared under the surface of the ice. 2 egg-like ice cubes lay quietly on the ground. However, many cracks had inadvertently appeared on the surface. In the middle of the ring, between the 2 ice eggs, there was a pure black stone lying there quietly. Its color was extremely obvious when compared to the pure white. However, Yun Nuoshing and the rest had yet to recover from the shock of what they had heard. They didn't bother to find out how the stone had appeared. Quarter moon. A supreme god from the primordial era was slumbering here. A forbidden god from the primordial era, quarter moon. It's actually him, Yun Nuoshing muttered in a daze. His hand trembled as he wiped away the cold sweat on his forehead. He had only heard the name quarter moon a few times. There were 2 pure black stones in the pendant, and a third one had appeared here. They were all related to quarter moon. However, the most important thing was, he looked at Little White. After coming out of that vision, Little White's entire body was trembling uncontrollably. His tiger-like eyes were wide open, and tears actually fell from his eyes, wetting his face. His long white hair was also moving without any wind. Anyone could tell that his state of mind was in turmoil. He and Little White both knew that finding the forbidden sky god crescent moon was Feng Yuan's long-cherished wish. And now, in this place, in this inconspicuous place, she had actually found it so casually? It was hard to imagine, but this was the truth. Who would have thought that a forbidden god from the primordial era was actually buried in this place of ice and snow at the edge of the realm of the gods? After learning the name of the god buried in the ice and snow, Yun Nuoshing became even more confused. The key to the ice realm was his ice spear, and that key was a fragment of his soul. It was locked on the pillar of creation in the Tana's water god temple. What was the relationship between Quarter Moon's burial place and his soul fragment? Or rather, what was the relationship between Quarter Moon and him, Yun Nuoshing? No one realized that the one who lost her composure the most was not Little White, but the Golden Crown Princess, who was the great elder of the Golden Temple. At this moment, Mei Mao's eyes were wide open, and her alluring body that was wrapped in tight clothes was trembling slightly. She was trying her best to control herself, but she could not control herself. She clenched her jade-like hands tightly. After a long while, everyone finally noticed her abnormality. Little White was also stunned. He was unable to control himself because he had finally fulfilled Yuang's long-cherished wish in his lifetime. Big Sister Jean? Yun Nuoshing also had a strange expression on her face. She tugged at her arm and called out softly. That call made the Golden Crown Princess's body tremble violently. Then, she took a deep breath and forced herself to calm down. Mei Mao turned around and looked at Yun Nuoshing. There was a serious expression on her face. "I'm fine. The golden crown princess took a deep breath. Her jade-like hands clenched the corner of her clothes tightly. She looked at Yun Nuoshing seriously and said, "I didn't intend to tell you so early, but I didn't expect to see this here. Perhaps this is fate. Little star, this quarter moon is a forbidden god from the primordial era. She is also the great hall master of the 9-deity temple." "That's right, she is your ancestor." Chapter 592. The cold wind circling in the air suddenly stopped, and the atmosphere froze in an instant. Yun Nuoshing and the others stared at the Golden Queen, their mouths opened so wide that a pear could be stuffed in. Although they were surprised, surprisingly, Yun Nuoshing did not find it hard to believe. It was just that this information came too suddenly, so sudden that it made him feel a little dizzy. He covered half of his face with his left hand, not knowing what to say. Little White, who was at the side, opened his eyes wide. He looked at Yun Nuoshing, then looked at the Golden Queen, who had a serious expression on her face. He scratched his face with his palm and suddenly realized that Feng Yueying was looking for quarter moon. Did he also know about this? Did he know that this ancient taboo heavenly god was his ancestor or something, so he's looking for his kin? Little White's tiger paw touched his face in astonishment. When he thought of this, he could not help but want to vomit blood. Back then, Feng Yueying went to heaven and earth, stepped on the star path, broke into other worlds, and searched for quarter moon's footstep. However, he never explained anything to them. Today's guess made his fair little face turn as black as charcoal. At this moment, the golden ring that had quieted down suddenly reacted again. A brilliant golden light flashed and drowned the place. Before everyone could react to the huge amount of information, they were dragged into another scene. In the world of ice and snow, among the layers of icebergs, a huge energy barrier suddenly expanded slowly, enveloping the countless icebergs. Brilliant auroras fell from the sky, connecting to form a gorgeous curtain, completely isolating the place. Among the layers of icebergs, on a relatively flat piece of land, a black figure was very dazzling in this dazzling white world. This person walked forward slowly, pausing with every step. Under the long black robe that dragged on the ground, there was a golden mark. The golden light was mottled, reflecting bits of sunlight. Even in this extremely cold place, it was not frozen. There were many terrifying wounds on the black-robed man's body. If one took a closer look, the golden mark on the ground was clearly the blood that flowed from his body. The mottled blood dyed the black robe into patches of golden mottled spots. His long black hair was disheveled. On his chest there was a terrifying wound that pierced through his heart. Even his black robe had a huge hole that went from the front to the back. From the front, one could still see that the heart had disappeared. Golden blood flowed down like a waterfall. If it was an ordinary person who suffered such injuries, they would have died long ago. However, he still staggered on this icy plain, taking one step after another. Behind him, the golden mark dragged on for an unknown length of time. Looking at his eyes, they were unfocused but determined. No one knew what kind of power supported him to walk to this place. After walking to a place, the black-robed man suddenly stopped. He raised his right hand and made an upward motion. Immediately, 3 icebergs protruded from the ice surface in front of him. Ice shards swirled in the air. Then, the center of the 3 icebergs slowly exploded, forming a flight of stairs. There were also 3 platforms and the icy plain square. It was exactly what Yun Nuoshing and the others had seen. The black-robed man walked to the center of the square. The golden blood that flowed out from his body fell on the ice surface, gradually drawing golden rings on the ice surface. After the rings were formed, they quickly melted into the ice surface and stopped moving. An icy blue long spear appeared in front of him. When Yun Nuoshing saw this long spear, his eyes trembled a few times. This long spear was the frost long spear that he was currently holding in his hand. It was also the key to this place. The black-robed man held the long spear with his right hand in a reverse grip. Then, under the shocked and speechless gazes of the crowd, he suddenly threw it towards the horizon. The frost-long spear was like a blue meteor that flashed and disappeared into the horizon in an instant. This guy is already in this state. Where did he get such great strength? It was unknown who muttered in the dark. Yun Nuoxing also nodded in a daze. His heart was shattered and blood flowed all the way. Not to mention an ordinary person, even an emperor god expert would have died long ago. And as if to confirm Yun Nuoxing and the others' guess, after the black-robed man threw the frost-long spear, he suddenly spat out a large mouthful of blood. Blood spurted out from his 7 orifices, causing his heart to tremble. The man panted heavily, breathing in the cold wind and snow. He waved his hand again, and took out 2 golden oval-shaped objects. He threw one on the ice mountain on the left and the other on the right. A golden light flashed between his eyebrows and drilled out. It chased after the oval-shaped object on the left and plunged into it, disappearing without a trace. After doing all this, the man directly knelt on the ground. His tattered black hood fell off, revealing an extremely pale and handsome face. Even though Yun Nuoxing had already guessed that it was that face, the moment he saw it, he couldn't help but clench his fists. This face was the one he saw at the Fire God Shrine. It was the 10th Hall Master, one of the ancestors of the 9 deities' shrine, as Empress Jean had said. Not long after the man knelt on the ground, his body fell to the ground. However, after he fell, he didn't die. His hands struggled to slide on the ice surface with difficulty. He inserted his fingers into the ice and pulled himself to the stairs in the center. He climbed up step by step, leaving behind a hideous and terrifying golden bloodstain. Yun Nuoxing and the others felt sad when they saw this. This was a divine god, one of the strongest people of that era. Why did he end up in such a miserable state? They watched as he climbed up the ice mountain and sealed himself in ice. Only then did this scene stop. They suddenly opened their eyes. The golden ring in front of them had completely dimmed. Yun Nuoxing and the others didn't know when they had started sweating. Looking at the frost-long spear in his hand, Yun Nuoxing's eyes dimmed slightly. This long spear was thrown out by Quarter Moon, and that direction should be towards the outside of the North Ice Realm. He didn't know what happened after that, but it passed through the hands of his soul fragment and finally landed in his hands. Now, it was guided here by this long spear. Buzz! The frost-long spear in his hand emitted a faint light. Yun Nuoxing felt a faint sadness from it. The eternal divine weapon had its own consciousness. Once again, it returned to the place where its former owner had fallen, making it somewhat melancholy. Yun Nuoxing even heard a sigh from the unseen world. It seemed to be the spear's consciousness. Looking at the pure black stone placed on the ice, Yun Nuoxing paused and reached out to touch it. His evil spirit I could see that the word Z was written in Kanzai's language. Previously, he had seen 2 black stones with the words Seal and Heaven written on them. This one was written with the word Z. He guessed that there should be another one. When the 2 words were combined together, it should be Seal Heaven and Earth. However, he didn't think too much about this for the time being and casually put it away. After a long time, Yun Nuoxing let out a long sigh. His fluctuating emotions slowly calmed down. "Let's go out." "How do we get out?" Yuanxi asked. Along the way, they had even walked into the ice realm. They had forgotten why they had come here in the first place. If we were outside, we would be forcefully teleported out of the North Ice Realm as long as we touch that door. But we can just use the one under our feet. Yun Nuoxing pointed at the silent golden ring under the ice. He raised his head and saw that everyone was looking at him strangely. He was stunned for a moment. Then, as if he had thought of something, he quickly raised the frost-long spear in his hand and explained, "It told me." Hearing this, everyone looked at the 3-meter-long spear and nodded silently. The eternal magic weapon had its own consciousness. Since it could open the door to the ice realm, it should be able to send them out as well. Looking back at the spatial curtain, Yun Nuoxing's eyes flashed with a complicated light. The throbbing in his heart told him that if he walked up with the swirling zither, he would be able to resist the peerless aura. However, he didn't want to do so now. Moreover, even if he saw Quartermoon's body, so what? Ding. The frost-long spear gently tapped on the ice. With a crisp sound, the silent golden ring began to spin again. It emerged from under the ice and enveloped Yun Nuoxing and the others. Afterwards, with a flash of golden light, they gradually disappeared in the golden light. After everyone disappeared, the golden ring quieted down once more. This place also became calm once more. Wind and snow slowly blew from the horizon and densely covered this place. In the distant Sourcepeak region, a sloppy old man in disheveled clothes sat cross-legged on a high mountain peak. His eyes shone brightly as he stared at the snow-white scenery in the distance. There were a few jars of fine wine beside him. A bonfire flickered in the wind. The most eye-catching thing was the colorful little pagoda above his head. It glowed faintly but gave off an extremely powerful aura. Buzz! Suddenly, a faint buzzing sound came from behind him, causing the old man to raise his eyebrows. He grabbed a jar of wine and raised his head to gulp it down. The wine spilled on his clothes and pants, making him look very miserable. However, he did not care. He wiped his yellowed face and turned around. When he saw a large group of people emerging from the golden light, his raised eyebrows raised even more. A moment later, he spat out a mouthful of wine. Having just returned from a world of ice and snow, the rising temperature made everyone heave a lazy sigh of relief. Before they had time to see where they were, they heard the sound of water being spat out. There was also a smell of wine, causing everyone to be stunned. Yun Nuoxing also raised her head and was stunned for a moment. Her cheeks twitched. "Why is it you? Why are you here?" The old man and Yun Nuoxing exclaimed at the same time. Xian, Feng and Yuan Shi were also stunned. They all knew this person. They had seen him before. He was the strange old man who held the lapis lazuli pagoda in the Tana's water god temple and the underground palace of the glaze god. He was Qing Feng. "It has been many years since we last met. I didn't expect to see you here. How does it feel to be a celebrity?" Qing Feng stroked his beard and laughed. Yun Nuoxing smiled bitterly. Before he could reply, the former's expression changed. She suddenly rushed up, pressed his shoulders and said quickly, "You came out from here. That is to say, you were expelled from the ice realm. How is the situation there? Is the door open? You also know the door to the ice realm? Have you been there? It is still closed there." Yun Nuoxing looked at him strangely and immediately glanced at the lapis lazuli pagoda above his head. "Of course I know. Those who were expelled will be sent here, and will not be able to go back for a long time. I have been waiting at the door for 5,000 years, and have not seen anything. What are you looking at? Kid, I am warning you. Don't mess around," Qing Feng said agitatedly. When he saw Yun Nuoxing's restless eyes, he suddenly glared and said vigilantly. Hearing this, Yun Nuoxing laughed dryly and waved his hand. However, he looked at the Empress. At this time, Mei Mao was also staring at the 9-story pagoda that was less than a foot high. There was a chill in her heart as she said, "Don't tell me that this is the lapis lazuli pagoda." Qing Feng was surprised and looked up. When he saw the Empress Mei Mao's murderous look, especially when he felt the valiant and unusual aura from her body, he felt a chill down his spine. He had felt that aura many times on the lapis lazuli pagoda. Seeing his dazed look, Yun Nuoxing also laughed in his heart. The lapis lazuli pagoda and the lapis lazuli treasure mirror's aura was very similar. After he successfully cultivated it, he could feel an inexplicable aura from the lapis lazuli pagoda that was affecting his Xian skills. Lapis Lazuli Treasure Mirror. You are from the Lapis Lazuli Divine Court? Qing Feng opened his mouth wide in astonishment. He lowered his head and stared fiercely at Yun Nuoxing before shouting, "Kid, you are not kind. You actually tricked me." This. You also said that those who were expelled from the ice realm would be sent here. At most, it is considered a chance encounter, right? Yun Nuoxing blinked and grinned. You. Damn it. This old man is leaving. Qing Feng's face changed greatly. He wanted to refute, but he saw that the Empress had already rushed over with a murderous look. Her white jade hand slapped out and he was so scared that his face turned white. He picked up the lapis lazuli pagoda and turned to leave. He tore the space apart and disappeared in a flash. Bastard, leave behind Master's lapis lazuli pagoda! The Empress saw that her attack missed, and he even used the lapis lazuli pagoda to tear the space apart. She was furious and her jade hand tore the space apart and wanted to chase after him. Yun Nuoxing sweated and quickly pulled her back. He smiled bitterly and said, "Elder sister, forget it. You won't be able to catch up." Qing Feng was only an Empyrean god and the Empress was an Empyrean god. Even if Qing Feng used the lapis lazuli pagoda, he might not be able to contend against her. However, the former used the eternal weapon, and she might not be able to catch up. Yun Nuoxing had seen that speed, and it was much faster than his light element. But, being grabbed, the Empress staggered and almost threw Yun Nuoxing out. She quickly stabilized his body and smiled bitterly. If that fellow cultivated the lapis lazuli treasure or the nirvana divine arts, I would be too lazy to bother about him. However, that fellow obviously did not cultivate, and yet he was holding onto the lapis lazuli pagoda. But you won't be able to catch up. Yun Nuoxing smiled bitterly. But. Hearing this, the Empress's smile became even more bitter. There was a touch of bitterness on her pretty face. She stomped her feet fiercely and sighed. She looked at him with some hidden bitterness. It's useless for you to look at me. I won't be able to catch up. Yun Nuoxing shuddered and shrugged helplessly. Chapter 593. After leaving the ice world, they weren't teleported too far away. At this moment, they were at the border between Taiyuan region and the North Ice World. Looking into the distance from this flat peak, they could still see the snow-white world. However, according to the map, the location of the void fire was still some distance away. They probably still had to enter that world of ice and snow. Yun Nuoxing and the rest weren't in a hurry to go. They found a small town nearby and stopped to rest for the night. At night, outside the small town, Yuan Shi and Nightmare were fighting to their heart's content. If Yun Nuoxing hadn't used the Netherworld Ruins sword to isolate this place, the small town nearby would have been sunk. Under a tree not far away, Xian, Feng and Qin Yen were chatting happily. As for Yu and Little Moon of the Qin family, they were also fighting happily. These two girls didn't see eye to eye. Now that they were fighting, the extent of their fighting was quite scary. The billowing demonic aura and immortal aura were mixed and shattered. The people of the demon race have an advantage in talent. They are born as demon race experts. However, before their bodies can withstand the power of the demon race, they can't fully utilize this power. Yun Nuoxing sat quietly on a huge rock. From time to time, he would raise his head to look at the moon and lower his head to look at the four people who were fighting. The Empress also walked over slowly, sat down not far away from him, and chuckled. Born as demon race experts. Yun Nuoxing chuckled. When he said this, a sentence appeared in his mind and made him a little lost. The little guy from the Yuan family has a god's spiritual body. This body constitution is said to be able to break through to that realm. As long as one is born in a force, he will be treated as a god's child and even be worshipped. Empress Mei Mao was glowing as she watched the battle between Yuan Shi and Nightmare. She said faintly, "Nightmare seems to have a physique as well." It should be the demon physique. That demonic aura is also the demon physique, and is very similar to the aura of the demon race. It is unpredictable and has a gloomy and cold energy. If one is careless and it invades one's body, it can even affect one's state of mind and emotions. Of the two body types, the evil demon body erupts earlier. It starts erupting at the demon rank. The god spirit body only erupts at the beginner god rank. I wonder which body type is stronger. With her jade-like hand supporting her chin, the Empress turned her head and looked at Yun Nuoxing, who was quietly raising her head. She jokingly said, "A group of 7 with 4 different constitutions, 1 with a high-level bloodline, and 2 divine beasts. When this group of people grows up, it will be really terrifying. There's also a crazy little star." As the Empress smiled, she extended her slender finger and poked Yun Nuoxing's face, causing him to pout gloomily. As a result, the Empress was even happier after being poked. "Do you want to spar? Do you want me to accompany you?" the Empress suddenly said. There's no need. I can't defeat you." Upon hearing this, Yun Nuoxing smiled bitterly and waved his hand. He turned his gaze and looked at the Empress's exquisite face. He sighed and said, "Moreover, it's better for me to avoid using my body's energy as much as possible. I'll just let it remain in a state of overflowing. My cultivation has also been interrupted." "Are you worried about the abyssal incident?" The Empress looked a little depressed. She had sensed Yun Nuoxing's situation the other day, and it wasn't so easy to solve. The only thing he could do was to stop his cultivation. According to Ziyi, every time he crossed a big realm, it would cause the demonic aura in his soul to surge. It would be very easy for the demonic aura to completely corrode his soul. A little. Yun Nuoxing nodded with a calm look on his face, as if he didn't care at all. If it were another god or saintess from another power, they would probably be dispirited or crazy on the spot upon hearing that they couldn't cultivate anymore. The Empress looked at him quietly. He looked at the moon in the sky and was lost in thought. He muttered to himself, "I can't cultivate because I'm afraid of abyssal. I can't cultivate my soul either. I'm stuck in a realm, I can't sleep, and I have nightmares." After eliminating all these, I suddenly realized that there's nothing I can do. The 8,000 books in my mind have already been engraved in my soul. I've already finished reading them, sigh. Is it that tragic? The Empress was speechless when she heard this. However, if she thought about it carefully, excluding cultivation, they were no different from ordinary people. They ate, drank, and played. They opened and closed their eyes to see the sun go away and welcome the moon. Their lives would slowly pass by. "I'll trouble others if I sleep. Forget it." Yun Nuoxing smiled bitterly and scratched his head, messing up his colorful hair. "How do you know that others don't want to be troubled by you?" When Yun Nuoxing finished speaking, a crisp laughter came from behind. The two of them were startled. They turned around and saw Xian and Feng walking slowly toward them hand in hand, and smiling sweetly at them. "Xingxing, just call us if you need anything. Don't worry so much." Feng walked gently to Yun Nuoxing and sat down in front of him. She tilted her head slightly and pressed it against his chest. She murmured in a low voice, "Just like how I rely on you. I also hope that you can rely on us a little bit." Just like a family. Yun Nuoxing was slightly startled. He lowered his head and looked at Feng. Feng also raised her head. Her bright and beautiful eyes flickered with attachment. It seemed that she didn't need to say anything. Those eyes made Yun Nuoxing's heart tremble slightly. He smiled absent-mindedly but didn't say anything. While Yun Nuoxing was absent-minded, Xian knelt behind him and took out a dark purple comb from somewhere. A faint woody fragrance lingered in the air, making Yun Nuoxing feel relaxed and happy. Her jade-like hand gently caressed her bright and soft long hair. The tangled hair slowly spread out under her 5 fingers, like a colorful waterfall gradually extending. Her thick long hair spread out like a spacious screen, covering the back of Yun Nuoxing. A gentle smile appeared on Xian's beautiful face. Her left hand carefully pulled up Yun Nuoxing's colorful hair. The dark purple comb in her right hand gently fell down and combed Yun Nuoxing's messy hair. A faint fragrance came from behind and in front of him. Yun Nuoxing wanted to say that he didn't tie up his hair. However, he seemed to have sensed Xian's faint emotions and couldn't say anything. There was also an indescribable feeling slowly flowing in his heart. It was very warm and intoxicating. However, when he tried to pursue it, this feeling dissipated into nothingness. The female empress, who was sitting on a rock beside him, hugged her knees with both hands and looked at this scene with a smile. She raised her jade-like finger slightly, and a faint glow circulated around it, covering the surrounding dozens of feet and isolating all sounds. The gentle moonlight shone, accompanied by the starlight, sprinkling down from the horizon. At this moment, it was as if time had stopped. Regardless of whether it was Yun Nuo or Ziyan, they did not disturb this tranquility, allowing it to become like a painting, quietly frozen. Early in the morning, in the sky above the small town, between the layers of clouds, a huge sword stretched across the sky. The Golden Empress and the others stood at the tip of the sword and looked at the huge fireball that was gradually rising. They had a rare moment of peace in their hearts. Perhaps this was the last moment of peace today. Soon, they might be going to an incomparably dangerous place. To be honest, the group of 8 god emperors didn't have much confidence in themselves. However, the children behind them were still chatting casually. It was as if they couldn't feel the pressure. Here, this is the result of Shao Shi and my research. As for the name, I still call it talisman. The main point is that I'm too lazy to think about it. This thing is engraved in one's mind and will explode with a slight touch of spiritual power. I haven't started to make offensive talismans yet. These are all auxiliary talismans that can restore internal energy, elemental power, and soul and spiritual power. Yun Nuoxing stretched out her right hand and 4 strange talismans floated above her palm. They emitted a strange light. Each talisman was only 1/10 the size of a fingernail. It was almost negligible. However, these talismans were made according to the condition of Brother Nuo's body. Each talisman can restore him to his peak condition. Therefore, you have to be careful when you use them. Don't let them explode, Yi Shi said immediately. With Yun Nuoxing's ridiculously large body capacity, if they were to explode casually, the energy released would probably cause Yuan Shi and the others to explode. Such a small thing can actually restore a bottomless pit like you? Yuan Shi looked at the small talisman curiously. After looking at it for a while, he stuffed it between his eyebrows. When the talisman came into contact with his eyebrows, it slowly faded and melted. Well, take some of them. They don't have an expiration date anyway. They can be stored for as long as they want. I have a lot of them here. Yun Nuoxing pointed to her forehead and smiled. Hearing this, Yuan Shi, Nightmare, Xian, Qin Yan, Feng Er and Xiao Bai did not stand on ceremony. They all waved their hands and took a dozen to 20 talismans from Yun Nuoxing's palm. These talismans were even more valuable in battle. If 2 people were evenly matched and exhausted from fighting, they could just detonate an energy talisman at this time to restore themselves to full health. To the enemy, this was fatal. As for Yu and Little Moon, Yun Nuoxing had specially made a few dozen sets of energy talismans that they could withstand last night. He had even taken their cultivation situation into consideration. Each set of talismans recovered more than the previous set. As for whether it was accurate or not, he could not say for sure. He could only remind them. Yi Shi made the talismans herself, and they were made according to the proportions of her body. The effect was more suitable than Yun Nuoxing's. After Nightmare took the talismans and heard Yun Nuoxing's explanation, he activated an energy talisman in disbelief. Immediately, An excessive amount of energy filled his entire body and rampaged through his meridians, causing his body to swell up a little. He was so frightened that he screamed like a ghost. He hurriedly grabbed the black scythe and soared into the sky. He used mystical skills and secret techniques as if they were free of charge to release the overloaded energy in his body. Yuan Shi and the others were scared when they saw this. Empress Jean and the others saw that he suddenly went crazy, but they did not know what happened. They walked over to Yun Nuoxing and asked her a few questions. The latter then told them about the talismans. In the end, Empress Jean looked at him as if she was looking at a monster. She couldn't help but mutter, "Pervert. Little brother likes to fiddle with these things. The most important thing is that he succeeded. It's not an exaggeration to call him a genius." The Empress smiled and rubbed Yun Nuoxing's head. Everyone sat on the netherworld ruins sword and watched Nightmare dance around with his scythe in the sky. His body was burning with energy flames, and the excessive amount of energy was about to burn him to death. This is already the 20th set of Chaotic Shadow Dance. It's the 21st set. It's the 10th time he used the lightning technique. 11, 12, 13. Yuan Shi watched from the side, and even took the time to help Nightmare count how many mystical skills he had used to activate this talisman. Yuan Shi, come up and fight me. Come up and fight me. I can't take it anymore. I can't take it anymore. Nightmare was sweating profusely. He couldn't stop shouting and shouting. The flames on his body were burning even more vigorously, almost setting his hair on fire. Being too popular is indeed a problem. Yuan Shi laughed heartily. He grabbed a huge red cauldron and rushed into the sky to fight with Nightmare. Everyone was speechless when they saw the dazzling energy fireworks exploding in the sky. They had woken up early in the morning and had not left the house for more than an hour. Now they were even fighting. These two are almost at the 3rd seal of the demon rank. Yun Nuoxing scratched her head. These two battle maniacs would run to the side and cause a ruckus whenever they had time. Unknowingly, they were almost at the 3rd seal of the demon rank. Someone tugged at her sleeve. Yun Nuoxing turned her head and saw Xian, who was sitting at the side, looking at her with a smile. She raised her right hand and a faint light slowly condensed. Just sensing it made her cheeks tremble. You're already at the 3rd seal of the demon rank. Lass, you. Yun Nuoxing looked at the smiling face and was speechless. She didn't expect that among the 5 of them, Xian was the fastest to reach the 3rd seal of the demon rank. Yuan Shi, Nightmare, and Qin Yan were also at the 8th seal of the demon rank. They were 2 levels away from the 3rd seal. This wasn't very far. However, Yun Nuoxing remembered that Xian was the last to start. She could only start cultivating after meeting him. At that time, he was already at the immortal rank, and she had just started cultivating with his help and stepped into the quasi-mortal rank. It seems that excluding you, Xian is the most talented among all of you. The Golden Princess was also a little surprised. This lass had been following behind Yun Nuoxing all day, and her own brilliance had been overshadowed by him. Only now did she remember that this lass had the 5 elements body. How could she be worse than the others? Seeing Xian looking at him with a face full of anticipation, Yun Nuoxing laughed dryly. He scratched his cheek with his fingers and reached out to rub her head. He smiled and said, "You're very powerful. You've surpassed me." Just this simple sentence made the smile on Xian's face grow even wider. She happily sat back in her original position and leaned close to him. All right, this lass's source of motivation seems to be this lad. Seeing that Xian was overjoyed by Yun Nuoxing's simple praise, the Golden Princess and the Empress couldn't help but laugh bitterly. Stop fooling around and save your energy. If we head over now, we should be able to reach by noon. The Golden Princess pulled down the 2 people who were still fighting in the sky and punched each of them in the head, causing Yuan Shi and Nightmare to faint. The surging energy in the latter's body also dissipated with a poof. Yun Nuashing nodded and observed a moment of silence for Yuan Shi and Nightmare. With a wave of his hand, the netherworld ruins sword shot toward the horizon like an arrow. Only a purplish-black light could be seen flashing in the sky. Surprisingly, Yun Nuashing wasn't as excited as he was at the beginning. The closer they were to their destination, the calmer he became. Although he couldn't control himself, he concealed it very well. The void fire, be careful. It's just a divine flame. It's not worth risking your life for. The divine flame is dispensable to you. Ziye's indifferent voice slowly sounded in his heart. He pressed his hand to his chest and gently grasped the purplish-red pendant. Then, he nodded. Chapter 594. Back in the land of ice and snow, fine snow fell from the sky. Although it was autumn, the northern part of the Sourcepeak region had already entered winter. The cold made ordinary people put on thick coats early. Wisps of smoke rose into the air, giving people a warm feeling. Near the edge of the Sourcepeak region, there were many glaciers. The thick ice even had a tinge of black. This place was like the North Ice Realm. It was an eternally frozen land. The ice and snow had never melted. The cold wind from the North Ice Realm eroded this land, turning it into a frozen land. In this place, a large expanse of glaciers was spread out in a staircase from near to far, increasing step by step. The glacier at the top seemed to be tens of thousands of feet high, like an ice wall erected at the border. The intricately arranged glaciers were like sharp blades, causing people to be intimidated just by looking at them. This godforsaken place actually hides a divine flame. That treasure map probably isn't Shirlaji. And it's a divine flame ranked 25th on the divine flame ranking. If it's really here, this area should be a desert. How can there be such a majestic glacier? Glacier. It's a glacier. Can you not be so agitated? Are you a repeater? So noisy, a stream of light rapidly approached from the distant horizon. The sharp sound of wind breaking resounded throughout the glacial valley. A huge sword that was hundreds of meters long flew over from the horizon and slowly stopped in the center of the glacial valley. The group on it raised their heads and looked at the huge ice wall in the innermost part of the valley. They were all a little stunned. It's an old trick. Boundaries, arrays, and the like. This void fire is most likely not wild. Someone might have set it here. Yun Nuashing swung his dazzling long hair and sighed. Anyway, this glacial valley is only so big. Let's look around. Yun Nuashing shrugged indifferently. Yes, that is 1 point big. Looking at the glacial canyon below that they could not see the end of, especially when they saw that he did not care and that it was easy for him to stand and talk, everyone's voices were a little bit gnashing their teeth, causing Yun Nuashing to shudder violently and laugh dryly. Yes, just a little. This old man is going. Yun Nuashing laughed dryly and waved his hand. Then, he suddenly put away the Netherworld Ruins sword and rushed down the canyon like a ray of light, catching the Golden Queen and the others off guard. By the time they reacted, he had already landed on the ground and was carefully observing the situation. The others were not angry. They hurriedly jumped down from the sky and scattered in various directions. Yun Nuashing stood where he was and did not move. He looked around for a while. When he heard a series of footsteps behind him, he smiled. When Ziyen and the others walked to his side, he waved his hand and walked towards the depths of the glacier. At the bottom of the glacier basin, a layer of cold air could be seen condensing at the bottom. The cold air was so dense that it reached up to the knees. Help me keep an eye out for something special. Halfway through, Yun Nuashing turned around and said. He was also observing the blue and black glaciers. Here, he saw a few large skeletons. It seemed like some giant beast had died here. The eerie white bones made Ur and Little Moon's hair stand on end. Big brother Yun, what's that special thing? Ur quickly ran to Yun Nuashing's side and held his arm. She couldn't help but turn around. Mei Mao's eyes flashed mischievously as she peeked at the white skeleton that was more than 100 feet tall. If you think something looks strange, just tell me. For example, that. Let's go take a look. Yun Nuoxing thought for a while and turned a corner. In front of him, he saw another skeleton that was dozens of meters tall. He walked straight towards it, causing Yu and Yu's beautiful faces to turn pale. Wah! Brother Yun, can you not look at this? Please, Yu is scared. Seeing him walk straight toward the skeleton of the giant beast that was more than 10 meters tall, Yu was so scared that her legs were trembling. She hugged Yun Nuoxing's arm tightly, her face pale. Little Moon couldn't help but roll her eyes when she saw her hugging Yun Nuoxing tightly. She muttered, "Coward." Yu also heard that soft muttering. She immediately turned Mei Mao around and glared at her. She said angrily, "I'm not scared. How many years has it been dead? What's there to be scared of? You're the coward. If you have the ability, don't hold Brother Yun." "I'm cold." Little Moon snorted softly. She swung her long hair like flowing clouds, leaving the back of her head for Yu. Her jade-like hand that was holding onto Yun Nuoxing's arm exerted more force, pulling him closer to her. Okay, stop arguing." Yun Nuoxing smiled bitterly when he heard the echoes in his ears. He freed his hands and pressed them on the heads of the two girls. He gently rubbed them, causing the two girls who were about to quarrel to stop. Their faces were slightly red, and they lowered their heads and muttered. "If Little Star becomes a nanny, there will definitely be people fighting to let you take care of the children." Xian couldn't help but cover her mouth and chuckle. She secretly transmitted her voice. "Little Star is very suitable to take care of children." Feng'er also nodded. There was a hint of a smile on her calm face. Yun Nuoxing's cheeks twitched. He ignored these words and ignored them. As they went deeper, the passage between the two glaciers became even narrower. At the beginning, the entrance was more than 10 meters wide. Now, it was only wide enough for 5 people to walk side by side. It seemed to be even narrower inside. "Why are we squeezing into such a narrow place?" Qin Yen couldn't help but ask. "I don't know. We're just walking around." Yun Nuoxing shook his head. He just wandered in casually and didn't have any other intentions. The few of them looked around. The two glaciers were black in color, and their width was also frightening. A faint cold air was emitted, and it drilled into their collars, causing the girls to feel a chill in their hearts. "Big brother, look inside." Suddenly, Little Moon tugged at Yun Nuoxing, causing him to stop in his tracks. She pointed at a dark place in the glacier. There seemed to be something shiny reflecting a faint light. Yun Nuoxing also saw that thing after taking a few glances. He raised his hand and placed it on the ice. The light element surged into the glacier, probing toward the thing that was reflecting the faint light. The light suddenly bloomed. The light element that bloomed illuminated the situation inside the ice. What rushed into their line of sight was a sinister big mouth. The rows of sharp teeth looked very shocking, and the scarlet tongue of a snake very well announced its identity. The light bloomed for only 0.1 seconds. In this instant, the big mouth and the snake's tongue appeared in their line of sight. Yu was so frightened that she screamed and hurriedly threw herself into Yun Nuoxing's arms, curling herself up. Little Moon was also so frightened that she jumped back a step. Although she was frightened, she resisted the urge to scream. When she heard Yu's scream, she looked at her with disdain, then carefully patted her chest. This was a big ice-blue snake. Its 2 venomous fangs shone with a sparkling light. That light seemed to have come from it. Its head was full of bones that looked like ice thorns, and its body was more than 10 meters thick like a crystal. Its slender body stretched out, and no one knew how long it was. It was completely frozen in ice. The moment before it was frozen, it seemed to still be hunting, or tearing at something, leaving behind pieces that looked like scales of other creatures in its mouth. Ice crystal snow python. According to its length and thickness, I reckon. Oh, there should be. Let me count later. 1, 2. There are 6 ice thorns on its head. It's equivalent to a human god, which means it's a heavenly demon. But in the end it froze to death in ice? Are you kidding? Yun Nuoshing observed the thorns on the head of this ice crystal snow python, then felt a little dazed. This heavenly demon with an extremely cold nature was frozen to death? It felt as if the god of fire had played with fire and killed himself. It was so funny. Could it be that it's still sleeping and hasn't died? Xian asked softly. No, it's completely dead. The moment my light element touched it, I knew it was completely dead. Let alone ice crystals, its body was frozen inside and out. Hearing this, Yun Nuoshing shook her head. This ice crystal snow python really couldn't be more dead. It's a pity. If it had continued to grow, it would have evolved into an ice-crowned heavenly python when it had 9 ice thorns. Its bloodline would have evolved, and it would have been able to rival an emperor god. It might have even had a chance to transform into a dragon and become a demon god. Yun Nuoshing sighed. The ice crystal snow python was a rare species that only appeared in extremely cold places. Who knew how many years it had taken for this one to grow to such a large size? Dragon. Brother Yun, does dragon refer to this? Yu who had jumped into his arms, trembled slightly. Her jade-like hand trembled as she stretched out towards the pitch-black ice wall and pointed inside. Everyone was stunned. Yun Nuoshing hurriedly guided the light element into the ice wall, slowly illuminating the situation inside. Then, everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. The ice crystal holy dragon of the frigid winter earth. It was a humongous creature. Its ice-blue wings were spread open, as if they wanted to cover this entire area. They couldn't see the end of it, and even the membrane of the dragon's wings was ice-blue. On its gigantic head, there were 2 gigantic silver horns that glowed with a metallic luster. They curved and pointed forward like the horns of a bull, filled with a sense of majesty. Its widened eyes were lifeless and empty. Even though they were separated by the ice wall, separated by life and death, they could still feel a vast and mighty dragon's might spreading out. Yun Nuoshing and the others stood in front of this ice wall, standing in front of this huge ice-blue dragon. They were like insignificant ants. The 6 of them added together weren't even as big as a dragon's scale. The land of ice and snow used up all its heavenly power and endless luck to give birth to a king of the ice mountain. He was protected by the heavens, and it was said that he had an innate divine position. Once he surpassed the emperor god stage and stepped into the god stage, he would be granted a divine position. Yun Nuoshing wiped the cold sweat off his forehead, and his handsome face turned black. He froze to death? You must be joking with the god realm. The king of the ice world with the innate divine position of ice and snow god. He was one of the many kings of the dragon race in the primordial era. Froze. Died. Froze. Yun Nuoshing stared so hard that his eyeballs were about to fall out. He suddenly hugged his head with both hands, and his handsome face was filled with pain. My brain is trembling. The ice and snow holy dragon has experienced more severe cold than tens of thousands of people in a lifetime. This, he froze to death. Xian and the other girls were a little dazed as they watched him laugh and roar crazily. They had known him for so long, and although they had seen him lose his composure before, this was the first time they had seen him lose his composure to such an insane and even pained state. Little star, is this ice and snow holy dragon very powerful? Xian asked. Yes, it's very powerful. Once it grows up and steps into the divine level, it's a divine beast. Although it's a little lower than the 4 divine beasts, it's still a divine beast. It's the king of countless demonic beasts and magical beasts. It has the innate divine position of the ice and snow god. It can be said that the place covered by ice and snow is its world. Yun Nuoshing came back to his senses and laughed bitterly. He stroked the ice wall regretfully and didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he said, "Then, it froze to death. This is definitely not caused by the power of nature. In my opinion, this ice and snow holy dragon is at least a demonic emperor, or even a demonic emperor. Sigh, there's no trace of life essence left. I can only make a rough estimate. If someone has the ability to freeze the king of this world of ice and snow." Yun Nuoxing's expression changed slightly, and he swallowed his saliva. He said in a low voice, "Only an expert of that level, and a divine-level expert who specializes in the ice element, can do it." The few of them fell silent. The words divine level were as heavy as a mountain. Just mentioning it made them feel stifled, and they couldn't breathe. "Xing Xing, there's still the aura of life inside." Feng Er suddenly raised her head and said without looking. Yun Nuoxing and the others were taken aback. "The aura of life?" Feng Er shook her head when she saw his startled expression. She said, "I can feel it. It's not the ice and snow holy dragon's aura, but it's of the same origin." Maybe, when Yun Nuoxing heard this, he turned his head and looked at the ice wall that was covered by the light element. He squinted his eyes in a strange manner. He naturally believed Feng Er's words. She was one of the 4 divine beasts, and she was the most sensitive to demonic beasts and magical beasts. Even the slightest aura couldn't escape her senses. However, this ice sculpture seemed to have existed for a long time. He looked around and finally stopped at the ice and snow holy dragon's dragon claw. There was an oval object in the huge dragon claw. It seemed to be an egg? Chapter 595. Sealed within the ice wall was the king of the ice world's magical beast. This was one of the kings of the dragon clan that possessed supreme majesty. It had already passed away many years ago. Within the ice wall, or rather, within its gigantic dragon claw, one could still sense a faint aura of life. Rather than calling it an aura of life, it was actually more like a pulse of life. It had not completely died, but from the looks of it, it was only a matter of time before it completely disappeared. The ice-snow holy dragon's egg, the aura of life. No, that's not the aura of life. That's a wisp of lifeline power. Even the most basic life force has disappeared. How long can the remaining wisp of lifeline power last? Yun Nuoxing sighed softly. Right now, in the spirit beast pool, I'm still using my bloodline to nourish a void spirit dragon egg. In fact, it's very difficult for the 2 of them to hatch again. It's very difficult unless... Speaking up to here, Yun Nuoxing's voice paused, and the index finger and thumb of his left hand lightly rubbed together as he sighed. Unless what? Qin Yen couldn't help but ask. Xian and Yuer might not know the status and value of the Void Spirit Dragon and the Ice Holy Dragon, but she knew very well. When she heard that there was hope for them to hatch, she also had a glimmer of hope in her heart. The bloodline of the gods. If my bloodline can be completely awakened, there's still a chance. The egg of the Void Spirit Dragon is placed in the spiritual beast pool. With my half-awakened blood of the gods, it's not enough to nourish the egg with its last bit of life. Well, if I'm willing to put in some blood of the gods, it might work. But I've roughly calculated the amount of blood that needs to be released. I'm afraid that it'll take all the blood in my body. By then, the half-awakened blood of the gods might go back to sleep, and I might die. Yun Nuoxing spread out her hands and said casually, "The price." Hearing this, Qin Yan's hope was instantly wiped out. It was basically using Yun Nuoxing's half-life to exchange for the life of the Void Spirit Dragon. If I release my essence blood bit by bit, it won't affect my bloodline. Taking into account the time it takes to release the essence blood and recover, I've calculated that 100 years will be enough. Then, Yun Nuoxing chuckled again. She turned around and saw Xian and the others looking at her worriedly. She smiled and said, "Don't worry, I won't do that. No matter how crazy I am, I have a bottom line." "So you admit that you're a lunatic?" Xian rolled her eyes at him. Yun Nuoxing smiled bitterly. She looked at the 10-meter-tall dragon egg in the ice wall and muttered to herself, "Although I can't revive it now, there will be a way in the future. Perhaps it's God's will for me to see it here." He chuckled and shook his head. He was thinking too much. Yun Nuoxing's expression turned serious. She waved her hands in front of her and made a closing motion. The light elements in the ice wall seemed to have received an order and gathered towards the holy ice dragon's left hand. Not long after, the 10-meter-long dragon egg was wrapped up, and a golden formation slowly appeared below it. "Come out!" Yun Nuoxing suddenly clapped her hands. The golden formation emitted a dazzling light that enveloped the entire dragon egg. Then, the same golden light appeared in the open space behind them. The golden formation suddenly appeared on the ice wall. With a huge flash of golden light, the 10-meter-tall golden dragon egg appeared in the open space behind them. When they turned around to look at the ice wall, the dragon egg on the holy ice dragon's claw had disappeared. The formation had actually removed the egg from the ice. They could even see that there was an empty space in the ice. The golden dragon egg had ice blue patterns. Even though it was just an egg, it looked very majestic. There was a strand of saint energy circulating on its surface. Even if the egg could not be hatched, its shell was still a good material for refining weapons. Yun Nuoxing walked to the front of the incomparably huge dragon egg and raised her head to look at it. She stretched out her hand and touched it. Vaguely, she seemed to feel a wave of telekinesis. There was some unwillingness and some pain. The source of the telekinesis seemed to be the holy ice dragon in the ice wall. Yun Nuoxing's heart trembled slightly. She lowered her eyelids and sighed softly. Her soul energy drilled out from between her eyebrows and rushed towards the ice wall. At the same time, a wave of her soul energy stuck to the dragon egg. She whispered, "Don't worry, I will treat it well. I will think of a way to let it live in the name of the divine blood in my body." As soon as she whispered, Yun Nuoxing felt a change in the telekinesis. The unwillingness and pain had changed. It became gentler, and there was also some love. It seemed to be telling her feelings that she could not express to the life in the dragon egg. Yun Nuoxing sighed and patted the golden dragon egg. Then, its size gradually shrank. From the initial height of 10 meters, it slowly shrank until it was only 1 meter tall. It was about the same size as Feng Er's egg. After carefully putting it into the spiritual beast pool in the core space of the Godhead weapon, Yun Nuoxing let out a sigh of relief. He cupped his hands towards the ice wall, then turned around and looked at Xian and the others who were confused. He smiled and said, "Let's go." Xian and the others only saw him put away the dragon egg. They did not hear the whispers. However, seeing the smile on his face, they thought it was a good thing and did not pay attention to it. Yu and Little Moon rushed up again. Each of them held one of Yun Nuoxing's hands. He smiled bitterly. Xian and the others giggled. After walking on the long and narrow ice path for more than 10 minutes, Yun Nuoxing looked at the dark hole in front of him and hesitated. This path was very strange. At the beginning there were 2 glaciers. Now, this long and narrow ice path led directly to the center of the ice mountain. Just standing at the 10-meter-tall hole, he could feel a cold wind blowing out from inside. It was as if he was going to hell. Yun Nuoxing struggled to free his hands and glanced at the 2 girls, indicating for them to let go. The 2 girls stuck out their little tongues and released the jade arms that were tightly holding onto his arm. He then took out a luminous pearl from his pendant, squatted down and rolled into the ice cave with all his might. An eternally bright pearl drilled into the pitch-black ice cave, illuminating 2 smooth ice walls. The ground was still smooth ice, and the luminous pearl rolled further and further into the cave without any resistance. It seemed to be a flat ground. Thud. Not long after, Yun Nuoxing heard an echo from the ice hole. The luminous pearl seemed to have hit something. He was startled. Did it hit the other side? Go in and take a look. Don't be too far away from me, and don't hold on so tightly. My hand is about to be crushed. Just as Yun Nuoshing reminded them, he felt a few pairs of small hands tightly grabbing onto his arms and palms, causing him to laugh bitterly. Moderate. After a while, Yun Nuoshing took a deep breath. The star energy in his body slowly circulated, illuminating the surroundings. He stepped into the ice hole. Xian and the others pulled on his long hair tightly and followed him into the ice hole. Stepping into the ice hole, they instantly felt a chill rush up their bodies. It was completely different from the temperature outside. Compared to the temperature inside the ice hole, the temperature outside could be said to be very warm. The ceiling made of ice was clean and transparent. The sky was dark. There was even a little snow falling outside, causing the inside of the cave to be dark. They could only see the surroundings by using their energy to illuminate the surroundings. At this moment, Yun Nuoshing and the others were inside a huge iceberg. The thick iceberg was right above their heads. The left, right, up, and down were all ice cubed. It was a mountain made of pure ice. They were right at the bottom of this iceberg. The inside of the ice hole was flat. There were no obstacles. Even the top was a smooth and flat arc. It didn't look like an ice hole formed naturally by melting ice. It looked more like someone had repaired this place. The star energy spread out and illuminated the entire ice hole. Not far ahead, at the center of the ice hole, they saw the luminous pearl that he rolled out. The object it collided with was a stone tablet, a black stone tablet. This stone tablet was embedded into the ice surface. Cold air gathered around it, but it didn't freeze it. The ice surface around it was very clean, and there were no signs of it being broken. It seemed like it had been embedded here for a long time. Seeing this stone tablet, they were even more certain that someone had deliberately repaired this place. A distance of 200 meters was far from the limit of the eyesight of Yun Nuoshing and the others. They could also clearly see the stone tablet. The luminous pearl gently leaned against the stone tablet, illuminating the line of words. The line of words that made his heart tremble. Grave of love, wind and moon shadow, I said I don't know. I don't even know who I am. Why don't you tell me who he is? Wind and moon shadow. Haven't you heard of him? Aren't you his son? It's too similar. The scene of him meeting Little White that day appeared in his mind. Little White's hoarse cries, the sadness in its tiger eyes, all of it was related to these 3 words. This time, he was here, and he saw the owner of these 3 words. The tomb, little star, are you okay? Xian saw Yun Nuoshing's soulless and dazed expression, and her heart tightened slightly. Those lifeless eyes showed signs of evolving into emptiness. She knew that he must be feeling very complicated right now. Her jade-like hand grasped his hand tightly, as if she wanted to pass her strength to him. Me? Perhaps my memories have stirred up a bit. However, I still don't have any deep feelings towards these 3 words. Regardless of whether or not he is related to me by blood, or perhaps I have never felt anything like familial affection, the name Feng Yuing is just Feng Yuing. Yun Nuoshing took in a deep breath of cold air and shook his head slightly. At this moment, his emotions were like a bottle of mixed feelings that had been knocked over. A part of the reason was because the memories of Feng Yuing in the pendant had awakened. The other part of the reason was that he himself did not know. Oh no, hurry and hide. Someone else is coming. Yun Nuoshing, who was still feeling complicated, suddenly shivered. His eyes looked in shock at the entrance of the ice cave. Just as he spoke, he laughed bitterly. This place was so flat that there was nothing at all. His line of sight was completely unobstructed. Where could he hide? Xian and the others also noticed this problem. They didn't know what to do and just stood there in a daze, staring at Mei Mao. Ah, forget it. Let's just hide like this. Yun Nuoshing groaned with a headache. He pulled Xian and the others towards the edge of the ice cave. The netherworld ruins soared and Ling Hongjian quickly fused together. Then, a spiritual barrier quietly appeared, enveloping an area of more than 10 feet around them. Ling Hongjian's barrier was also activated at the same time, instantly covering this place. However, this hurriedly created area was really too small. It was obviously uncomfortable for the 6 of them to squeeze in here. Yun Nuoxing looked down helplessly and realized that there were many white jade-like arms on his body. Light footsteps approached from afar. Yun Nuoxing looked nervously at the entrance of the ice cave and couldn't help but gulp. In this place that was so quiet that even if a needle dropped, it would sound like thunder. The gulping sound gave Xian and the others a fright. Although they knew that the sound couldn't be heard, they were still a little nervous. When the last footstep sounded, Yun Nuoxing saw that a person had suddenly appeared in front of the stone tablet. The sudden appearance scared the others so much that their hearts clenched. Especially when they saw that it was a woman who they weren't familiar with, they hurriedly covered their mouths. She was about the same height as Feng Er. Her entire body was covered in a layer of dark blue robes. Her cloud-like icy blue hair casually draped over her back like flowing clouds. It was as smooth as silk and almost reached the ground after it was let down. Her graceful and beautiful face looked at most 25 years old. Her noble, elegant, and slightly cold temperament set off her beauty. In her arms, she was holding a cluster of snow-white flowers. The faint fragrance of the flowers condensed into a substantial airflow that filled the ice cave. Combined with her appearance and aura that ordinary people couldn't compare to, she was a rare fairy in the world. That noble aura was naturally emitted from her bones, making it difficult for people to look at her directly. If combined with the aura that made Yun Nuoxing feel a little scared, she was the #1 goddess in the 9 heavens. Although she couldn't be compared to Xianyin, he was sure that the woman in front of him was definitely a super terrifying expert. He stole a glance at her eyes. That pair of crystal-clear blue eyes contained the vicissitudes of life, profoundness, and heart-wrenching sadness. It was as if she had been worried for a long time. How could a 25-year-old woman have such eyes that had been washed away by time? I haven't seen you for a year. How have you been? This time, I have slept for a little longer. The hidden illness in my body is also beginning to stir. I will probably be able to find you in about 1,000 years. The woman knelt in front of the stone tablet. The sad Mei Mao stared at the stone tablet. She gently put down the bouquet in her hand. There was a little bit of color on her sickly white face. Her delicate hand gently stroked the stone tablet and brushed across the few words. Her tears were like a reservoir that had been opened. Her graceful face had become a mess because of her tears. Yun Nuoxing's heart tightened. Thinking of what Little White and Princess Jean had said, a name appeared in his mind. Ning Qianxue, the expert who had stepped into the post-god level. Oh my god! A living god! She is not far away. He was frightened by his own thoughts. In any case, he had lived with Xianyin for more than a year. However, in her heart, he was her family. The so-called god's pressure and identity would not appear. Other than using her divine power to bring him to the starry sky, the world of the gods, and many other worlds to guide him in cultivation, he had not seen her use her power more. Even the golden figure that he had seen last time was only a shadow that had been left behind at an unknown time. However, at this moment, he was looking at a living god. That hidden power shocked him. He was even worried that the weak barrier made by the 2 broken god weapons could block her sight. It has been more than 2 eras, and I still haven't found your bones. Back then, you left me alone. Where did you go? What is this so-called fate of yours? Why did I hear the news of your death after we parted that day? You said that you would not leave me behind. You said that you would come back one day. It has been 3 eras. Where are you? Schwer has waited so painfully. I really want to die here and search for you. My heart has already disappeared along with you. All that is left in my heart is a tearing pain. The blue-robed woman knelt in front of the stone tablet. Her silent crying was heart-wrenching. She spoke softly as if her heart had died. On her beautiful face, There was only twisted pain and despair. Ziyen and the other girls couldn't help but sniffle when they saw the deity's despair and pain. They were all women, so they seemed to be able to feel her heartbreak. Yun Nuoxing also felt a faint sadness in his heart. He could not help but sigh heavily in his heart. He finally understood what was going on with that pair of lifeless eyes. It was a pair of eyes that had already died. It should not have appeared on a living person's body. Her heart, her soul, and her spirit had all died along with Feng Yuying's death. He did not know what kind of power had supported her to live until now. If a god wanted to die, even a god could not save her. The whispering and crying continued for a long time. Yun Nuoxing felt that his shoulder was wet. He did not know which of the girls behind him had shed tears on his shoulder. It was like a waterfall had opened. His shoulder was a little cold. The temperature here was already low. At this moment, he felt a little cold. He did not dare to release his energy to resist the cold. After a long time, the whispering stopped. However, it stopped abruptly. Yun Nuoxing also saw the blue-robed woman, Ning Qianxu. She lowered her head and looked at a shiny object. Her eyebrows were slightly knitted. Although her face was covered with tears, it did not stop her from emitting a majestic aura. Her knitted eyebrows directly went to Yun Nuoxing's heart. It made him stop breathing. He quickly turned his gaze and was so scared that he almost stopped breathing. "Oh no! I forgot to take back that luminous pearl," Yun Nuoxing whispered in horror. Zian and the other girls were so scared that they suddenly raised their heads and hurriedly wiped away the tears on their faces. When they looked carefully, their pretty faces turned pale. At this time, Ning Qianxue had already picked up the luminous pearl, which was half the size of a fist. She pinched it between her two fingers. Her frown also scared them so much that they stopped breathing. Ning Qianxue slowly stood up from the ice. She was still holding the luminous pearl in her hand. She wiped the tears on her face with her long sleeve. Her face, which had been filled with pain and despair just now, was now calm. Mei Mao looked around the ice cave. Her cold voice made the ice cave tremble a few times. "Which friend is here? Is it fun to peep at my business?" This voice was also mixed with a great pressure, which made the barrier formed by the two divine swords fluctuate violently. The pressure directly penetrated. The whirlpool zither in Yun Nuoxing's heart lit up spontaneously to resist this pressure. "Wait. The moment the barrier is removed, I will convert the power of this barrier into the power of space. Hurry up and leave. Tell Sister Jean and the others to leave this place. The power at that moment is only enough for 5 people to escape. Don't worry, I have the whirlpool zither. There is an 80% chance that we can escape. You guys will be a hindrance." Yun Nuoxing turned her head. Her voice trembled and she quickly transmitted her voice. Although she saw Zian and the others' faces change drastically, she did not give them any room to refute. However, as she spoke, she felt that something was not right, because their faces changed too dramatically, as if there was something terrifying behind them. However, she did not need to ask anything, because she also felt an extremely terrifying pressure coming from behind. She turned her head abruptly and saw Ning Qianxue's gloomy face. Her slender jade-like hand stretched out in front of them. She even heard the sound of the barrier breaking. "It's over." Yun Nuoxing did not know whether to laugh or cry. Her heart slowly filled with despair. How could they encounter such a thing in this damned place? Chapter 596. The sound of the barrier shattering completely extinguished Yun Nuoxing's last hope. The barrier created by the 2 godly weapons was as fragile as paper. It was broken by the slender hand. The power of the stars in his body stopped circulating in an instant. Even his spirit and soul were trembling. He was suppressed by this deity to the point that he didn't have any energy to use. He was like an ordinary person. He couldn't even take out the maelstrom zither, Seeing that graceful and pretty face appear behind the shattered barrier, Yun Nuoxing fiercely clenched his teeth. He suddenly spread out his arms and shielded Ziyin and the rest behind him. Seeing that slender jade-like hand rushing towards him like lightning, he could only close his eyes and wait for death. Just as he was prepared to receive the palm that could destroy the world, that jade-like hand suddenly came to a halt and abruptly stopped in the air. Seeing that the palm had suddenly stopped, Ziyin and the others fiercely gasped for breath. She also clenched her teeth and suddenly took a step forward. She extended her jade-like hand and was about to pull Yun Nuoxing behind her. However, Ning Qianxue suddenly spat out a sentence that stunned everyone. "You're back." Ning Qianxue's beautiful eyes, which were originally filled with anger and coldness, became gentle in an instant. There was even a color that Ziyin was extremely familiar with. It was just like the feeling she had when she looked at Yun Nuoxing. That pair of beautiful eyes that stared straight at Yun Nuoxing also gradually became a little red. Yun Nuoxing's face trembled slightly. Hearing these words, he was a little unable to react. He quietly opened his eyes a little, only to see her looking at him in a daze. 2 lines of tears flowed down from her eyes. The jade-like hand that had reached an inch in front of his chest could not stop trembling. Although there was still a hint of sadness on her face, at this moment there was even more uncontrollable joy. Compared to when she was kneeling in front of the stone tablet, she was much calmer. It's been 3 eras. The realm of the gods is really big. I still haven't seen it all. Ning Qianxue smiled through her tears. Seeing that he had opened his arms, she thought that he wanted to hug her. She slowly walked towards Yun Nuoxing and gently put her hands around his waist. She leaned into his arms and hugged him tightly with both hands. "How have you been these years? Where have you been traveling in the starry sky? We planted a tree at the place where we first met. It has now grown into a towering tree. Every month, I go there and sit for 10 days. Without you, it's a little lacking. Can you accompany me this time? I don't want to leave you again." Listening to the soft words of the woman in his arms, Yun Nuoxing was like a petrified statue. He didn't dare to move or speak. His arms were still open, and there was still a smile on his face. Although Ning Qianxue had withdrawn all of her power, he didn't dare to move. Ziyin and the others behind him also covered their mouths tightly and looked at each other. A few pairs of Mei Mao glanced around. Then, like Yun Nuoxing, they chose to be stone statues and even held their breath. Gradually, the voice of the woman in his arms became softer and softer. Yun Nuoxing suddenly felt that the pair of jade arms around his waist had lost strength. Ning Qianxue's body slowly slid towards the ice surface, which made him slightly shocked. He hesitated for a moment, but still hurriedly reached out and hugged her. Looking down, he saw that she had already closed her eyes and fallen asleep. There was still a peaceful smile on her beautiful face, and there were still tears on her beautiful face. Taking a deep breath, Yun Nuoxing gently carried her up. He turned around and saw the strange expressions of the women. He smiled bitterly and said, "What should we do? You ask us. We don't know either." Ziyin's expression was also bitter. This Ning Qianxue most likely mistook him for Feng Yueying. Back then, when he saw the portrait of his ancestor, Quarter Moon, in the Fire God Temple, it was very similar to him. Then, the grandfather and the granddaughter should also be very similar. It was fine if she mistook him for someone else. Xing, in the memories that you saw from Feng Yueying, did this person exist? Feng walked up, looked at Ning Qianxue, and asked softly. Hearing this, Yun Nuoxing shook his head and said, "In the small part of memory that appeared back then, there was only Feng Yueying and Little White. I didn't see her. Maybe I haven't seen that part yet." As he said this, Yun Nuoxing freed one hand and held Ning Qianxue's slender waist with the other hand. He took out the purplish-red diamond-shaped pendant from his chest. This purplish-red pendant that was only slightly more than 2 inches tall was also emitting bits of light at this moment. just like when he saw Little White that time. Maybe this could awaken a part of Feng Yuang and Ning Qianxue's memories? Yun Nuoxing hesitated for a moment, then sighed. Let's find Little White first. He and Ning Qianxue should be old acquaintances. That's good too. Xian and the others nodded, looking strangely at Ning Qianxue, who was lying in Yun Nuoxing's arms. Seeing that they all nodded, Yun Nuoxing also heaved a sigh of relief. Just like that, he carried Ning Qianxue horizontally and flew out of the ice cave. After the latter's divine oppression disappeared, he also had a connection with the power of the stars that he had lost contact with, which made him feel a little more at ease. After rushing out of the ice cave, he didn't stop for long. He mobilized the light elements and quickly flew out of the glacial canyon. At the same time, he took out a jade scroll and called the Golden Queen, Little White, and the others over. When Yun Nuoxing and the others rushed out of the canyon and arrived at the entrance of the glacial basin, the Golden Queen and the others just happened to fly back from afar. Little White also flashed past like a bolt of white lightning, arriving in front of Yun Nuoxing and the others. When they looked closely, they were a little confused. This Ning girl? What is she doing here? Little White widened his eyes in astonishment. Compared to the three Ji-Yuns, Ning Qianxue's appearance was no different, other than being a little haggard. He recognized her at a glance. What made him even more astonished was, why was she here? You said that she is Ning Qianxue? The Golden Queen, the Empress, and the others were stunned at first. After hearing the name, they were also shocked and a little vigilant. This was a divine strong warrior, one of the few strong warriors at the top of the pyramid in the gods' world. Why was she here? Yun Nuoxing laughed bitterly, then told them a little about what happened in the ice cave just now. But there weren't really any skeletons buried there. I saw it very clearly. Yun Nuoxing mentioned again. He didn't see Feng Yuang's skeletons in the ice cave, not even a cenotaph. Little White, that pendant can let you see a part of your memory. Can you let her see it too? Yun Nuoxing took the pendant out from his chest, looked at him, and then looked at Ning Qianxue, who was sleeping but still holding on to him tightly. He had a headache. Even though she was shockingly beautiful up close, this was a divine being. She was in a daze and mistook him for someone else. Once she woke up, it would be hard to say. It should be possible. If Yuang left behind other memories, other than letting me know, it should be for Ning girl. Little White muttered to himself for a while, then nodded and said, let's give it a try. Moreover, she's not in a good state now. She mistook you for Yuang. After seeing that side, she went from extreme sadness to ecstasy. Her flame of life is showing signs of extinguishing. If a divine being wants to die, no one can save her. Little White's heavy voice made Yun Nuoxing and the others feel complicated. The divine being that was omnipotent in their hearts actually had a side that was filled with despair and sadness. The 7 emotions and 6 desires will not change. Yuang was Little Ning's everything. In her world, only his shadow was left. Yuang was her spiritual pillar. The day Yuang died, Little Ning's world collapsed. Sometimes I even feel that living is a punishment for her. Little White sighed. As he spoke, even his eyes revealed some sadness. He looked at Yun Nuoxing, who was also silent, and said, let's begin. Yun Nuoxing came back to his senses and raised his head to look at him. He nodded, then looked at Xian, Feng and Lixin, and Jingyu and said, I'll have to trouble you guys again. Ziyan and Feng smiled faintly and shook their heads. And Lixin and Jingyu also smiled faintly and didn't say anything. Looking at the appearance of the 4 of them, Yun Nuoxing also smiled and stood in the void like this. After grasping the power of space, even if he was in the sky, he could walk as if he was walking on flat ground. Yuan Shi, Qin Yan, and Yi Shi looked at each other. The 3 of them nodded and spread out. Lei Lang and the others also spread out, vigilant of the surrounding situation. Yun Nuashing took a deep breath and bent down slightly. He held the pendant and gently touched it to Ning Qianxue's smooth forehead. Buzz! The bright light that burst out shocked everyone. Yun Nuashing felt as if he was going to be swallowed by the light. He was shocked. When he gave it to Little White, he didn't have such a big reaction. Yuing, seriously, why are you in a daze? If you continue to be in a daze, I'll call you Little Feng. Cough, cough, don't. I'm 3 years older than you. You can call me whatever you want. Little Feng, Little Feng, Little Feng, Little Ing, hee hee. You said you wouldn't call me that. Who told you to ignore me? I was just in a daze. Hee hee, stop fooling around. Look here. This is the sacred place of your Tianxue sect. Although you're the holy maiden, it doesn't seem too good to bring me in. What are you afraid of? My Little Feng's name is known throughout the Taiyuan region. I'm bringing you in. Whoever dares to oppose me will be beaten up. Can't we just be nice? Okay, Yuing. The dazzling white light slowly faded from her eyes, and a scene slowly emerged in front of her eyes. After a full minute, Yun Nuashing's vision slowly returned to normal. It was a land of ice and snow. An extremely huge ice dragon sculpture stood on the surface of the ice, and a strange aura circulated around it. Not far from her line of sight, right below the ice dragon sculpture, there was a young man and a young lady slowly walking towards the ice sculpture. Their hands were tightly held, and the two of them were chatting and laughing. It was a beautiful scene. Look, look. The girl suddenly took out a human-shaped ice sculpture from behind the ice dragon sculpture. Upon closer inspection, the ice sculpture was almost the same as the boy. Even the expression was carved very well. However, there was one thing that was very noticeable. This boy was even more beautiful than the girl. If he didn't speak, no one would know that he was a boy. Therefore, that ice sculpture, Yun Nuashing, looked no different from a girl's ice sculpture at first glance. The ice sculptures that can be stored in this land of ice are the past sect masters of the Tianxue sect. It's not very harmonious for you to leave me here. The boy looked at the ice sculpture and sighed. However, there was a hint of joy in his eyes. Don't worry about that. Is it beautiful? Is it beautiful? This is carved by me personally. It's not condensed from the ice element. It's beautiful, really. There's nothing wrong with it except that it's a little biased towards girls. Tisk, you're a girl. Stop. We can't live like this anymore. Ah. Stop fooling around. Haha. I was wrong, okay? Help, I was wrong, I was wrong. Shui knows that she was wrong. Ha ha ha. Looking at the two people fooling around in the distance, Yun Nuashing couldn't help but chuckle. Feng Yuang was just like him. He had a girl's face and skin, but it turned out that he was a boy. Although the girl was very young and was only 16 years old, he still saw some traces of Ning Qianxue. Little Bai said that the two of them met when they were traveling. However, when Yun Nuashing saw this scene, he felt that they had known each other since they were young. After all, their cultivation was higher. A person who was 100 years old looked about 17 or 18 years old. Just like himself, he was conservatively estimated to be 32 years old, but his real face still looked like that of a 14-year-old. Are you leaving? Yes. After I saved you that time, I stayed here for 3 years. Now that I see that you're fine, I'm relieved. I have to continue on my journey. I want to go too. No. You should stay here and be a saintess. We'll meet again in this lifetime. My intuition has never been wrong. What about the truth? Well, you're a girl. I'm afraid that it'll be too hard for you, so don't go. Be good. We've promised that we'll meet again. At that time, don't pretend that you don't know me. I won't. I don't have a home anymore. You are my motivation to survive. How can I not recognize you? You're the one. Don't despise me just because you're powerful. Swear, you said this in front of so many people. I'll drown in their saliva, tisk. Then it's a promise. We'll meet again in this lifetime. Whoever doesn't recognize the other party will have to. Let me think. Then he'll be punished by kissing the other party 100 times. Alright, it's up to you. If you recognize me later than I recognize you, then you'll have to kiss me 100 times too. Damn. This is a losing deal. I'll take it. Seeing this, Yun Nuoshing's face was filled with black lines. He remembered that Little White had said that when they met again at a certain ruin in the Ganyuan region, the two of them did not recognize each other and even fought. What exactly was going on? Yun Nuoshing thought that this part of the memory had come to an end. He breathed a sigh of relief. He closed and opened his eyes, thinking that his consciousness would return. However, the scene in front of him changed again. He was stunned. When he took a closer look, his expression changed drastically. That's... Chapter 597. It was a life planet that had already fallen apart. The Earth had cracked, and the fragments of the planet were thrown into the sky. The exposed core emitted a blazing light. Magma turned into a rain of fire and fell from the sky, melting the earth, evaporating the sea, and disintegrating the atmosphere. It was a scene of the end of the world, and there was an extremely large sun hanging in the sky. The broken planet was slowly moving towards the sun, and the scorching solar wind had scorched the surface of the planet into a charcoal black. In this scene of destruction, all life on the original planet had already disappeared. No living creature could survive in such a hellish environment. However, on the barren, fiery earth, there were still two people. The two of them quietly looked at the scene of destruction without fear. The scorching flames could not hurt them at all. On the ground beside them, there was a place that had completely caved in. A rainbow-colored light bloomed from the ground, adding a bright color to the sky that was dyed red by the rain of fire. Schwerer, you should go back. I can do the rest by myself. I won't. You sealed Xiao Bai, Xiao Qing, and Xiao Wu. Are you hiding something from us? I won't let you go to your death. My death. Why do you have to start with my death? I won't go back. The energy core of the dying life planet is about to be obtained. You have to tell me what you want to do. You're already a god, and you're still acting like a spoiled child. The man in blue laughed bitterly. Girl, it's okay. You've believed in me for hundreds of billions of years. Why don't you believe me after just a few minutes? Didn't I say that I'll be in seclusion for a long time this time? You can go back and wait for me. Wash yourself clean and wait for me. But I always feel that if you leave, you won't come back. Our wedding hasn't been held yet. Well, that's true. It hasn't been held yet, so you should go back and wait for me to come back, right? Wait for me to come back with a starry sky and a star field. I'll give the whole world to you. Not bad, right? But I still don't want to go back. I'll wait for you here, okay? The man in blue stared at her for a long time before he sighed heavily. He nodded and smiled, then close your eyes. I have a gift for you. Oh, the girl with long blue hair blinked at Mei Mao, smiled happily, and closed her eyes. However, the man stretched out his hand and gently tapped her forehead. The girl's consciousness suddenly weakened. Before she lost consciousness, Mei Mao once again opened her eyes. A heartbreaking despair flashed out, but she could not do anything. She could only feel herself falling into an embrace and falling into a deep sleep. Lass, I'm sorry. This is probably the only time in my life that I've lied to you. I'm afraid you'll have to walk on your own in the future. I'm sorry, can you write an IOU for your wedding? Alright, I guess you can't. I will definitely return. Believe me, no matter how many years it takes, no matter how many epochs it takes, I will definitely return. I swear on my soul. I've told you many times about my destiny. Now, it's right before your eyes. Let me finish the rest by myself. The man in blue let out a long sigh. He raised his head and a teardrop gathered in his eyes. He looked at the sea of fire that was collapsing, the sun that was as hot as hell, and the brilliant starry sky. He suddenly let out a loud roar. The sharp roar caused the space to shatter. Even the sun was affected, and its light wavered. After a while, he lowered his head and stared at the girl who had fallen asleep in his arms. He smiled faintly, and there was a strong reluctance in his eyes. He lowered his head and gently kissed her on the lip. He raised his head and gently lifted her up with both hands. Then, he pushed her into the starry sky. She was like a meteor that streaked across the sky, across the star region, and disappeared. After watching the flash disappear, the man used his hand to wipe away the tears that hadn't fallen from the corner of his eyes. He stood up and strode towards the sunken ground that was emitting the seven-colored light. With a single step, he jumped into the sunken ground and was completely engulfed by the sunken light. The scene stopped abruptly. Yun Nuoshing suddenly opened his eyes. There was some confusion and disbelief in his widened eyes. He had seen the seven-colored light in the scene once before. It was the unclear memory that he had awakened in Divine Sky City. On the burning sea, the seven-colored light soared into the sky from the sea and was swallowed by a sword light, the energy core of a life star? Yun Nuoshing murmured in confusion. Then, he repeated it several times in his heart and firmly remembered it. "Little star, you're awake?" A gentle voice came from beside him. Yun Nuoshing came back to his senses. Only then did he notice that the ceiling was made of ice-blue ice. Not far away, he could hear the whistling of the wind. He turned his eyes and looked around. This seemed to be an ice cave, and the place he was sleeping on was carved into an ice bed. Although it was made of ice, he did not feel cold at all. His palms were warm, which made him feel very at ease. Turning his head, as expected, he saw the four people sitting beside him. They were all staring at him with their eyes wide open. He felt a little embarrassed and could not help but cough dryly. "How is it? What did you see?" Little White walked over from the side. Seeing that Yun Nuoshing had woken up, he asked, "Little White, what is the energy core of a life star?" This sudden question startled Little White. His expression changed slightly. His eyebrows trembled slightly and he said softly, "Why are you suddenly asking this? It was mentioned in my memory. I intercepted the most important information, and it was these few words." Yun Nuoshing sighed and sat up straight. He looked straight at Little White and waited for his answer. Little White pondered for a while. His small hand tapped on his chin. There was some hesitation on his young face. The Golden Queen and the others were also very curious. They stared at him blankly, but they did not urge him. After a long time, Little White sighed and said, "This is something that only the gods know. It's okay to let you know. You can't touch this thing anyway." The so-called energy core of a life star can also be abbreviated as the energy core of a star. If you really want to say it, yes, in your memory, in the Xianlong continent that you went to, the energy core of the Xianlong continent that you last saw was similar to this one. The only difference was the fundamental difference in strength. After all, the energy core of a small world is semi-artificial. Moreover, if the Creator did not dabble in this field of research, he would not know that the energy core of the small world he created had been born. This energy core is the star itself, the small world itself, and the world itself was born by itself. It carries everything that happens in this world carrier and controls all the energy changes in this carrier. Every star has it, whether it is a life star or a life star. To make an analogy, it is like the energy carrier in your stomach. If it is taken away but the energy is not completely erased, the energy of the star itself will decline for a period of time, and its vitality will weaken. It will not return to normal until the energy core recovers after a long time. However, if the remaining energy is completely erased, the life star will be completely drained. Its vitality will not recover, and it will become a hell where no one can live. In the primitive age, it was also called the world core. Little White's gentle voice made everyone immerse themselves in it. Yun Nuoxing's expression also changed a bit. However, he had seen the world core before, so he was not too shocked. He had heard about it from Ziyi before, and now that Little White mentioned it again, he connected the two together. He was somewhat glad that there was still a large sea of Yin spirit fire when he left, so that the Xianlong continent would not be completely drained. Yun Nuoxing retrieved the last scene from his memory and played it in front of him. After Little White finished watching, he sighed heavily and smashed his fist on the ice cave, creating a huge hole. There was a hint of anger in his eyes. This bastard sealed me, Azure Dragon, and Black Tortoise just like that. This time, he sent Little Ning away just like that. What exactly are you hiding in your heart that you can't even tell us? After Xian and the rest, as well as Yuan Shi and the rest, finished watching, they immediately looked at Yun Nuoxing, making him feel inexplicably guilty. Perhaps it was because Feng Yuying's style was somewhat similar to his. Although he did not admit it, everyone knew that if something happened, he would shoulder it all by himself. Everyone felt that it was very tiring for him to live like that. He would shoulder all the burdens by himself and was unwilling to share them with others. The reincarnation of karma, the ties between the previous life and the current life. If it was Yuying, then yes, he would definitely not say it because he didn't want us to worry. He is a fool who carries everything by himself. Little White, don't you know that? A chuckle suddenly sounded from behind, making everyone tremble. Little White, who had his arms crossed in front of his chest, also trembled and his cheeks twitched. Without turning his head, he sighed and said, I saw this clearly after knowing him for 10 years. How could I not know? I am just curious why he is still hiding things from you, Little Ning. Yun Nuoxing's expression was very stiff. His cheeks and eyelids twitched in shock. He turned his gaze and looked at the ice bed beside him. Ning Qianxue had already sat up and looked at him with a beautiful and satisfied smile, making his whole body stiffen. You're back. Ning Qianxue's smile was gentle. Mei Mao blushed a little and stared at Yun Nuoxing nonstop. This familiar face that was deeply embedded in her soul. Even if they were separated by 3 eras, even if she had forgotten her own appearance, she would not forget his appearance. Little Ning, don't get the wrong person. He is not Yuying, he is Yun Nuoxing. Speaking of which, isn't he your grandson? Little White turned around helplessly and looked up at Ning Qianxue, sighing. Grandson? Ning Qianxue blinked at Mei Mao in shock. Then, she suddenly laughed softly. Her jade-like hand covered her small mouth and laughed until her delicate body was trembling. She stood up from the ice bed and walked towards Yun Nuoxing. Princess Jean and the others frowned slightly. They wanted to stop her, but when they saw her expression, they stopped. They just sighed and moved to the side. Yun Nuoxing hurriedly jumped down from the ice bed. When he saw Ning Qianxue standing a foot in front of him, his eyes flickered and he felt a little uneasy. Seeing his uneasy look, Ning Qianxue could not help but laugh. She raised her head slightly and looked at him carefully. She reached out her jade-like hand and caressed his cheek. She smiled and said, Yuying and I have not done the deed as husband and wife. How can we be his grandson? Huh! This development is not right, right? Hearing this, Little White, Princess Jean, Xian, Yun Nuoxing and the others were all shocked. They had traveled hundreds of millions of miles to find their family, but in the end they were not. No, he does not have Yuying's bloodline in his body. I have been with him for half an era. How can I be wrong about this? Ning Qianxue smiled and the expression on her face became gentler. The hand that was caressing Yun Nuoxing's cheek moved slightly and pressed on his chest. She said something that scared everyone half to death. Because this child is Yuying. The netherworld is the home of all living beings. Reincarnation is the journey of all living beings. After 3 eras, Ying has returned. The one here is his soul. Welcome back. Chapter 598. The underworld was the home of all souls, and reincarnation was the journey of all souls. This sentence had been passed down from a long time ago. Reincarnation had always been the biggest secret. No living person could explain the experience of reincarnation to others. Even gods could not see through reincarnation. Endless reincarnation. The underworld is like a relay station. It receives the departed souls and allows them to embark on a new journey of life. Yun Nuashing softly murmured a sentence from the ancient book. He took in a breath of cold air and then exhaled fiercely. He believed in the existence of reincarnation. For example, the reincarnation lake that he had seen at that time, and the rudder-like roulette that was reflected in the reincarnation mirror between everyone's eyebrows. There were so many examples that indirectly proved the existence of reincarnation. What he lacked was only direct evidence. However, if someone said that he was Feng Yuing, even he himself would not believe it. He just thought that Ning Qianxue missed him too much and mistook him for someone else. However, she could not possibly not recognize her own grandson, right? This made Yun Nuashing very confused, especially when she looked at him. Her gaze was so gentle that it was as if she was looking at her lover. It made him feel a little dizzy. Seeing him in a daze, Ning Qianxue covered her mouth and laughed softly. She looked around and saw that even Little White's mouth was wide open in shock. She shook her head helplessly and said, "It's normal that you don't believe it because it's really hard to believe. For tens of eras, even gods could not figure out reincarnation. However, I have a way to prove that you are Yuing. I can prove that Yu Ying's soul is in this body." "How do you prove it?" Little White came back to his senses. His body shook, and he hurriedly turned his head to look at Ning Qianxue. Ning Qianxue smiled. She retracted her hand from Yun Nuashing's body and took out a silver-white chain. When he saw the chain, Yun Nuashing suddenly took in a breath of cold air. He was clearly looking at a chain, but he seemed to see a divine moon slowly rising from the horizon. This is a level 12 material, divine moon platinum. She actually used it to make a necklace. Yun Nuashing was originally very shocked, but after thinking about it, he and Sister Liuli both used the colored glass divine crystal to cultivate. It seemed reasonable for her to use it to make a necklace. After all, the gods were rich and could do whatever they wanted. Ning Qianxue couldn't help but chuckle when she saw him go from shock to calmness within a second. After seeing Yun Nuashing, her sickly pale face became a little rosy and her complexion improved a lot. Yun Nuashing also clearly felt that the pair of eyes that seemed to be dead slowly came back to life. Perhaps soon, this Lord God would get rid of the haze in his heart. Yun Nuashing took off the mystic moon platinum necklace from his neck. On the necklace hung an icy blue scepter that was about the length of a finger. The scepter was engraved with obscure divine runes, and on the top half of the scepter, there were 2 spirals that wrapped around the scepter. They extended upwards and finally wrapped around an icy blue diamond-shaped gem at the top of the scepter. That icy blue gem emitted an indescribable aura, and that feeling was something that Yun Nuashing felt all the time. It was the same feeling that the swirling dragon Zither gave him, that was the aura of divine authority. But after feeling it carefully, the aura of divine authority on the scepter doesn't seem to be as strong as the one on the swirling dragon Zither. After feeling it with his heart, Yun Nuashing couldn't help but mutter in his heart. Ziyi had said that divine authority was the representative of a god. It seemed that Xian Yin's strength was probably above the god in front of him. After Ning Qianxue took off the necklace, she looked at it with some nostalgia and smiled. Then, under the astonished gaze of Yun Nuashing and the others, she hung it around Yun Nuashing's neck. He was so shocked that he couldn't speak. Southern Plains, the ruined temple. This is the key. Go there. You must go, Ning Qianxue said softly. Now? Yun Nuoxing raised the small scepter in shock. This was something that Ning Qianxue wore close to her body. It had a warm body temperature and a faint fragrance, which made him blush inexplicably. Ning Qianxue shook her head and said with a smile, "Just remember to go." After saying that, she stretched out her hands and gently held Yun Nuoxing's face. She smiled and said, "No matter how many eras, no matter how much time passes, I will continue to wait. Now, I have waited for my world to come back. Although I have a way to make you remember everything directly, as long as you are the soul of Yuing, the taboo of reincarnation is somewhat troublesome. Schwerer, I can only let you find everything by yourself." Yun Nuoxing lowered his head and muttered. After being stared at by her for a long time, his face was a little hot and he was a little shy. Remembering the purpose of coming here, Yun Nuoxing raised his head and looked at Ning Qianxue. He opened his mouth and was stunned again. He didn't know how he should address her. He should call her senior. In theory, that should be the case. Just call me Schwer like before. Ning Qianxue covered her mouth and smiled. She saw his awkwardness and said, "Or you can call me Xiao Xue." No, this is even weirder. Everyone couldn't help but say this in their hearts. They turned to look at Yun Nuoxing and saw that his expression was getting weirder and weirder. They also lamented in their hearts, "We let you live for so long and now you've caused trouble." This reincarnation or whatever, it might be a Shura's field. Sister. Xue, I think it's better to call you that. It feels weird. Yun Nuoxing blushed and scratched his head. He turned his head away embarrassedly. Xian and the others were greatly shocked. It was rare to see him so shy in front of a woman. However, this range was excluding the Golden Empress, and the others. Thinking of this, Xian and the others seemed to understand something. They looked at Yun Nuoxing with a strange expression. Could it be that this guy couldn't handle the royal sister? Well, that's fine too. I won't force you. Before you recover your memory, you can call me that. Ning Qianxue nodded. However, she still felt a little unnatural when she heard this form of address. In her heart, she had already regarded Yun Nuoxing as Feng Yueing. She hadn't recovered from her past memories. When she heard him call her sister, the change in her expression was very interesting. Sister Xue, are you familiar with this area? Yun Nuoxing asked. Yes, from this canyon to the world of ice and snow over there, it's all the territory of the snow goddess sect. However, this is a forbidden area. There, I buried my thoughts of Yueing. Usually, no one is allowed to set foot here. Ning Qianxue stretched out her jade finger and pointed around, then pointed to a distant place. Then, is there anything strange in this canyon? For example, a place that doesn't have water elemental energy? Yun Nuoxing asked tentatively. Hearing his strange question, Ning Qianxue looked at him deeply. Then, she turned to look at the Golden Empress and the others. She felt that this group of people was extremely powerful and asked tentatively, "Are you here to find those things?" "Those things? What things?" Yun Nuoxing tilted his head. A strand of colorful hair fell along his shoulder as he asked. "The bodies of the magical beasts sealed in the glacier. Are you here to find those?" Ning Qianxue asked him directly. Hearing this, Yun Nuoxing shook his head. He pinched his palms a little guiltily. He had just taken a dying ice snow holy dragon egg from the glacier. Seeing him shake his head, Ning Qianxue also frowned slightly. Her left hand hugged her right elbow, and her right hand pressed against her red lip. She looked like she was deep in thought. She even paced slowly. After a long time, she turned around. Her long blue hair fluttered like silk. She looked at Yun Nuoxing and said, "Are you here to find the void fire?" "Yes." Hearing the words, void fire, Yun Nuoxing's eyes suddenly emitted a bright light. His excited look, coupled with his handsome face, made Ning Qianxue slightly absent-minded. She coughed dryly and suppressed the redness on her face. She said softly, If it's the void fire, it is indeed in this glacier world, but what? Yun Nuoshing asked hurriedly. I can't say for sure. The void fire was left here by someone. The person who left it behind also set up a test. The content of the test changes according to the person. I waited for 3 eras and let the core disciples of the Snow Immortal sect try. However, no one succeeded. Even I couldn't pass it. Ning Qianxue sighed disappointedly and said, I'm not afraid to tell you that there are only 5 tests for me. Let's not talk about the first 3. The 4th test. I have to go to the chaotic void at the edge of the starry sky and survive in the blazing hell for 100 years. I did manage to survive. It was a narrow escape, that place. When the Golden Queen heard about the blazing hell, her face turned ugly. The corners of her eyes twitched. She smiled bitterly and said, I've been there once. At that time, I was already an emperor god. However, I only lasted for a day before I escaped. If I had been a minute later, I might have died there. Yun Nuoshing's cheeks twitched. Although he did not know what the so-called blazing hell was, the Golden Empress, as an emperor god, had only lasted for a day. That place was definitely not a fun place. Ning Qianxue, on the other hand, had lasted for a full 100 years. From this, it could be seen how big the gap was between an emperor god and a later god-level fighter. What is the 5th test? The Empress couldn't help but ask. The 4th test was already so terrifying. What about the 5th? When the 5th test was mentioned, Ning Qianxue's expression became very strange. It was neither fear nor anger. Instead, it was confusion. Everyone was confused as well. The path has long been opened. It leads to a transcendent secret that has never been spoken of. The broken vessel, it connects with heaven and earth and blends with everything. Points to the end of the world. Ning Qianxue said a few sentences. Everyone was confused. They could understand the 5 sentences. The syllables were familiar. However, when the 5 sentences were placed together, they were all confused. They couldn't understand what was going on at all. This is the hint of the 5th test. As for what it means, I don't know. Like you, I can understand the 5 sentences. However, when they are placed together, I feel that I have lived my life in vain. Ning Qianxue smiled bitterly and said, I have solved this riddle for more than 2 eras, but I still don't understand what it means. However, no one is able to understand the 5th test. However, not everyone's test is so difficult. I've seen so many tests, and in the last one, the easiest one was to let him cultivate in the sun for a year. That disciple was only a divine king at that time, and he even asked me to send him into the sun. You can probably guess the result. Not to mention cultivating for a year. He turned into ashes as soon as he entered. Fortunately, he only brought an avatar with him, or he would have really been burned to ashes. He wanted to wait until he was strong enough to go, but in the end, when he had the ability to cultivate in the sun, the test changed, and the difficulty increased a lot. After learning about this, he let go of this so-called stupid test and no longer cared about it. Now, he is an elder in the Snow Goddess sect, Ning Qianxue said indifferently. Ning Qianxue said calmly, then what's the point of playing? Everyone couldn't help but curse in their hearts. This test was too unkind. However, if you want to go, I can bring you there. You want to subdue the void fire, right? Ning Qianxue looked at Yun Nuoshing and said. Yun Nuoshing nodded and said with a smile, Sister Shui, just call me Little Star. That's what everyone calls me. Okay. Ning Qianxue smiled and nodded. She turned around and walked out of the ice cave. She said, let's go. I will bring you there. Yun Nuoshing looked at everyone and nodded. She hurriedly followed. Hearing about the so-called test and about seeing the void fire, she was nervous and excited. Little Star, let me ask you something. Xian walked side by side with her. She turned her head and winked at Mei Mao. Yun You have been reincarnated so many times. Did you have a partner in every life? As soon as Xian asked this question, Yun Nuoshing directly spat out a mouthful of saliva. When the sharp-eared people heard this, they also pondered for a moment. They glanced at him, who had an unnatural expression. That handsome face, as a girl, was devastatingly beautiful and ethereal like an immortal. As a boy, it was somewhat heroic and profound. He could simply kill both. It was not surprising that he was called a femme fatale. If those little sisters still haven't passed away, then… Yuan Shi seemed to have realized something. Boss, it's the Azura Arena. That's the Azura Arena. You womanizer. Nightmare also became excited and laughed loudly. Then wouldn't I have a lot of opponents? Xian sighed worriedly. However, looking at Mei Mao's sparkling appearance, she did not seem to be worried about this at all. When Yu Ying and I were in the starry sky, there were many little sisters and little sisters who wanted to snatch him away from me. There was also a certain princess of a transcendental life star who chased us for tens of thousands of light years. Yu Ying was not used to rejecting people. In the end, I was the one who chased them away. Ning Qianxue also waved her little fists and laughed. Sigh, so many little sisters. The golden princess looked meaningfully at Yun Nuoshing. Mei Mao smiled. And chased them for tens of thousands of light years. Yuan Shi grinned evilly. So popular. You can even start a huge harem. Qin Yan also laughed and fanned the flames. Being stared at by so many pairs of strange eyes, Yun Nuoshing broke out in a cold sweat. He clearly did not do any of this, but he felt inexplicably guilty, as if he was Feng Yueing. This doesn't seem to have anything to do with me, right? Yun Nuoshing wiped his sweat and laughed dryly. He felt as if he had been publicly executed. Who knows? Little Star likes to flirt the most. Xian chuckled. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.